8:34. We're going to call this meeting to order.
Okay.
This is-
I'm also going to call the select board meeting to order, and I'm going to have David just read the agenda for us for the
then
day.
once you guys are done, I'll go through ours here.
Yep, great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, we will vote to approve or amend the agenda. And then there's a joint meeting with the Sherborn Advisory Committee and Capital Budget Committee. And then consideration and review of FY 2021 budgets and capital requests under the Select Board, including Council on Aging, Farm Pond, Elder Housing, Veterans, Historical Commission, Conservation Commission, Building Inspector, Select Board, Insurance, Recycling, Transfer Station, Department of Public Works, Town Buildings, Police Department, and then consideration of a one-day liquor license for Pauline Bone for February 8th, 2020, and then executive session under the exemption MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, subsection 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the town and the chair so declares, Police Officers Union, and Chief Thompson Novak Consulting update.
One thing I talked to Stephen before, I'm just going to do the one-day liquor license before the budgets, because that should take us just a couple of minutes. But with that one change, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? All right. So do I have a motion to approve
Yeah,
the?
I'd move approval of the one-day liquor license for Pauline Downs. The certificate of insurance is all in order, no police detail. February 8th, 75 people.
So moved.
Second. Okay, all in favor? Thank you, thanks.
Thank you, George. And so here for the Sherborn Advisory Committee, we've been called to order. I'm going to do a quick roll call. At the moment, we've got Mark Albers, Drew Pichal, Natalie Ware, Jane Matarazzo, Brendan Daly, Steve Leahy, myself, Peter Galatano, Stephen Tsai, and Wasim Basili are all here. Our agenda, very similar to what you heard David mention a moment ago. We are going to be going through budgets that fall under the Select Board, and there'll be an executive session that we've been invited to be a part of. With that being said, this is a bit of a first time we're doing something like this, that we're having a Saturday meeting with all the budget makers and department heads that fall into the Select Board. Normally, this is a different process with a lot more meetings. So this is the first time we're doing it, and we hope it goes well overall as part of the budgeting process for the year. The real goals here are to ensure that there are fewer overall meetings between department heads and budget makers in the Select Board and the Advisory Committee throughout the course of this budgetary process. We think that this is going to work out well and, again, save everyone some time and gain a bunch of efficiencies. And the second goal is to ensure that we've got full budgetary cohesion with the members of the Select Board, members of Advisory, and all the department heads here. So, with that being said, just one more comment here as part of Advisory. As we do often before many of our budget-focused meetings, I like to note that really the responsibilities and goals of the Sherborn Advisory Committee are to advise the citizens of town on all the articles, including the omnibus budget and capital budget that'll go before them at the town meeting coming up in April. And within that, as far as we think about budgets, the goal is to get the town all the services that the town desires and needs at an efficient cost to the town. For that, the other thing that we often use as kind of one of our pillars to think about comes from the excellent 2019 master plan that the planning board put out. There's a number of comments in there specifically about the economic sustainability section in town. And they note, as something that we know and see on a regular basis, that one of the goals of Sherborn has to be to achieve and maintain economic sustainability through prudent decision-making, fiscal restraint, and guided development while we still maintain the rural atmosphere and we maintain our excellent schools. So that truly is the goal of this budgetary process. Again, get the town all the services that we need at an efficient cost. So that being said, if I have no other comments from any of my fellow members up here, I'm going to get the ball rolling. Can I invite the Council on Aging to present their budget, please?
Steve, could I say a word about revenues?
Please, Paul.
So I read in our book here, the document I think advisory prepared about the status of the town, and you summarized it just now. There's a couple of revenue items that you didn't discuss and that the town hasn't acted on and that we may want to consider. One of those is in 2018, the state adopted a statute expanding the lodging tax to include what are called platform rentals, otherwise known as Airbnb type of activities, of which Sherborn has some. And I think the building inspector could tell you a little bit about the fact that Sherborn does have these things. We're entitled to a 6% tax on that. And if the statute authorizes the planning board to work on zoning articles, the idea of the statute is that the communities are supposed to make these home rental opportunities safe, and as part of that, we can get a 3% fee, and we're able to charge inspection fees and so on and so on. So the other communities that I work for are all implementing the tax and collecting the tax, and Sherborn hasn't taken any action at all on those. The other comment I would make is that on the state level, I've participated in trying to obtain for the town a number of earmarks, and the history of the town has been that we haven't used the earmarks that have been given to us. For example, we had an earmark to assist us in designing a senior center. We have an earmark to provide engineering services for a sidewalk on the east side of Main Street. We had an earmark for $1 million worth of funding for Pine Hill Road. The legislature has appropriated these funds, and the governor has signed off on them, but they haven't been coordinated with the town, so the revenues that we could obtain and use, we never did use. And so it's somewhat discouraging from the point of view of trying to get money for the town, is that there seems to be like a lack of coordination between what the town really needs and what the legislature is willing to do. In other words, why appropriate money if the town isn't going to use it? Might as well give it to someone else to use. So there are opportunities out there. Perhaps when the selectmen consider the warrant for the upcoming year, we can talk about putting the tax for Airbnb on the warrant to see if the voters will do that.
Okay.
And other things like that, which might affect your calculations.
Thanks,
Duly
Paul.
noted. Thank you.
One thing just to note on the Pine Hill Lane, there is a placeholder for a warrant article on completing Pine Hill Lane, so if there's a $1 million earmark from the state, hopefully that means we wouldn't be asking the town for very much money to complete it.
Well, that's kind of lapsed. It's like 6 years.
Well, I mean, is it available or not? I guess we'd have to go back to the state, is that what you're saying? Okay. And then on the Airbnb, I don't think that's gonna move the needle very much, just based on the size of our town, but it's worth exploring. And I think that's a question for the planning board, not so much here.
But duly noted, because any helpful revenues would be beneficial to the town to help get the things done that we need to get done in town. So, thank you, Paul.
May I add a comment on the Airbnb piece of it?
Go ahead, Chris.
Our zoning bylaw does have a minimum rental period of 30 days, which does restrict Airbnbs to longer term rental building. We see less of real short term leaks, that kind of thing.
I was gonna say, I just pulled up Airbnb, there's nothing listed in town at the moment. Okay.
It's a potential zoning bylaw change that we might want to look at, allow for shorter term rental periods.
Actually, Stephen, I think the rooms at Heritage or Airbnb, there's a mini house
Oh, really?
over Farm Pond that's an Airbnb, and there's one up off of,
They're under, it's a special permit under 3.2.3, I believe it's renting a room.
Okay, like I said, I went to Airbnb at the moment, and there's nothing listed, so, but,
Thank
anyway,
you.
let's move on.
forward.
Council on
Yeah.
Aging, good morning.
Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sue Kelleher. I'm the new director of the council. And I just want to give a little summary of what's happened this past year and in regards to the budget. So we, as you may or may not know, we had the director, the program coordinator, one of our elder advocates, and the drop-in coordinator had all left the COA within a month of each other without notice. During the time of the search for the new director, they had a program coordinator step in to keep things running, along with the part-time elder advocate that we have. And during the search, the board had reevaluated the staffing of the COA and had restructured the positions that had all abandoned us at the same time. So our current staffing, which resulted in an increase in our salary budget, I started at the end of October, and my hours were increased salary-wise from 35 to 40. A program coordinator position was replaced by an assistant director position, and that was an increase in hours for that position from 19.5 to 25. The position was actually approved for up to 35, but we've capped it at 25 because of the budget. We had eliminated one of our elder advocate positions and increased the current advocate position to 16, so she works 2 days a week. And then we have an event coordinator position that replaced the drop-in coordinator and decreased those hours for from 10 to 5. So we have a staff of 4, and we have basically the same hours, but due to the rates that we had to increase for new staff that were approved by the Personnel Committee, even though the hours stayed the same, rates had been increased to meet the request of the workforce and to attract qualified candidates. So the current staff has been charged with rebuilding the COA with new programs, increased visibility, and community outreach. Our increase in expenses by $2,500 includes printing and postage as we develop new marketing materials to be more targeted and mailed to specific groups. Outreach, which is one of the expectations of the COA, to outreach and work with residents that may be socially isolated or homebound. Program development to offer programs for older residents and provide different programs. And mileage, because we will be out on the road more and participate in professional development and outside meetings. We also continue to look for other funding through outside grants. We use the state money that we receive from the formula grant prior to spending the town funds. So some of that's restricted on where we could spend those funds, which then those items end up in the budget line items.
Okay.
May I ask, the justification for the increase in hours for the director?
I believe it was part of the restructuring. I was not part of that discussion. The board was, so maybe Jerry can.
Yeah, we felt very strongly that there needed to be coverage for full 40 hours a week in the COA office. There were many times where, there was no one there. Senior would come looking for help, and there'd be nobody in the office. And we just felt that the need was there for a full 40 hours a week.
Prior to that, what, aside from the need or someone not being there during that office hours, what other value was being missed by not having a 40-hour position? Or is it was just convenience that we increased to 40
Oh,
hours?
no, it was not just convenience. The amount of work that's involved in building new programs and the outreach that's needed. At the time, there was a lot that wasn't getting done, and we felt that, we wanted more done for the seniors in town, and it's going to require more hours.
And so none of the programs in the past will be carried forward?
Oh, no,
or-
no, oh, no. All of the many of the programs from the past are going to be carried forward. We were looking to increase the amount of programs and the
And-
services that are provided.
And when I came on board, a lot of those programs were stopped. So we've increased our exercise programs, we've increased our, we do a weekly lunch that we have scheduled, presenters and lunch people, and we've also partnered with the recreation department in order to offer more classes and help us mitigate the expenses by splitting it with rec.
Chuck,
Oh, please, sorry.
What is your assessment of the patient, of the, your client population? My sense is that Sherborn is aging. I don't have the demographics, but
Yeah.
all my friends seem to be aging, but
Well, I know that the state
Not
formula
chocolate.
grant is based on the 2010 census, and they had Sherborn at 812 seniors. According to the town clerk.
Yeah, we
have
currently have,
1,075.
1,075.
So that's about over a 30% increase in 10 years.
And it's just going to continue to go up, as you know. The demographics for the aging population, most people, it's more cost-effective if they can age in place rather than going to other, condominiums or things because their expenses are not controlled. So in terms of not their mortgage but their condominium fees are going up. We have one elder that probably has to move because her fees have gone up so high, she can't really afford to stay there anymore. So, and there's a lot of economic insecurity that has recently been brought about from the state surveys that people don't really talk about. There's a lot of people, a lot of elders in Sherborn that don't want to ask for help. And there's a lot of people homebound that we just haven't been able to reach yet.
There's also, do you see the elder population continuing to grow as well, based on we have these over 55 developments being built? I assume that's going to keep more seniors. I think the goal of that is actually to keep more seniors in town.
And, it's hard because there's no transportation system here, so I am looking into, the DOT does grants every year, trying to get a van, so those guidelines come out in the spring, just to help with that, just get people around.
With a increasing population or client list, as Chuck so politely put it, with the increase in staffing that you've got here, when I say, sorry, not increase in staffing, because as you point out, you end up with the same number of staff, but further hours on a number of them and kind of change of, looks like, responsibilities. Would you be able to, then, thinking forward into future years, because I think the same thing, there are more and more 55-plus housing developments being built here, would COA be able to handle a continued increase in the number of clients and really see an increase maybe in expenses? I guess my question is, would this current number of staff be able to handle increases for the next few years? Or do you expect that there'd be further increase in needs for staff as well? Again, I'm sure
Yeah.
expenses will go up with more clients, but
Yeah, I'll tell you right now that I'm working at least 50 to 60 hours a week trying to get things done. The program person is 25 hours. She's working extra. We had taken the 5 hours from that other 10-hour position to try to mitigate costs. So, we're trying to find volunteers to come and help us. So I would expect that as the population ages, the needs are going to change, and yes, staffing would be affected.
Yeah, we do an excellent job of recruiting volunteers, and we have a large number of seniors helping seniors. and providing, enormous services, whether they're, just house calls or helping out at the senior cafe on Thursday afternoons. So, a lot of the work is being done currently by volunteers.
And because of the turnover in staff, I'm not really sure, like, how much more outreach for the elder advocate is gonna be necessary. So she's only here 2 days a week. So we're filling in when she's not here. So again, it's hard to assess because there was no information for me to make a judgment on whether we needed another elder advocate or not. So
Right.
we're going with what we have for now.
And so, sorry, one more question. So under the assistant director, is that an hourly position or a salaried position?
It's a salaried position with benefits, and that was recommended by the personnel board.
And that was a combination, I think you guys changed. It really came from the
Program,
program
yeah.
director
And the
and the
drop it,
advocate,
yeah.
right? Yeah, they kind of combined those
Yep.
into one
Yes.
position. I remember, David, you were involved with that, correct, when they, helping the board do that?
As the new staff continue to climb the learning curve and plateau off and the program stabilize, there should be an efficiency in terms of what the department does.
Yes.
So is that factored in going forward? I know Steve wants to add more people. I would like you to become more efficient.
I'm sure we will
as-
be, well, right now, a lot of our time, we have, the Friends had purchased a data-based program called My Senior Center. So that takes a lot of time, and we're hoping that that becomes less intense with hours and stuff. So I'm sure things will switch, but because we're sort of not mandated, but the board expects us to build other programs. So I'd say, yes, we'll become more efficient on the administrative stuff, but we'll become more productive on the outreach and the building of classes.
So I'm the liaison to the Council on Aging, and when we met, we had a conversation about some of these increases being offset by revolving funds.
Yeah.
That were available. I don't think I saw that reflected in the budget.
It wasn't reflected right away, but that would be an option that we could do. We went in with our original budget.
Yeah.
So the other option would be, we have a revolving fund that is from our Lifetime Learning program, which is very popular, and we could take money out of that to fund part of the hours for the assistant director.
And Steve, somewhat to your question, we, in our conversation, had talked about offsetting with revolving funds, not just for this year, but for the foreseeable future as well.
Yeah.
I think we had talked about a 5-year plan.
Yeah,
so.
the Lifetime Learning Program is extremely successful. I forget what the numbers are of how many participate. It's hundreds, or 150 or so. And it actually generates a profit every year. And because we're required to use the funds for lifetime learning, the assistant director her responsibilities are running that program. So we could take, 5 hours of her salary from the lifetime learning revolving account.
How much is in that revolving account, do you know?
It's over $20,000 right now.
And you said it grows each year if you're,
Yeah, a little bit,
A little
yeah.
bit,
Yeah.
okay.
This year, 1,000 we figured for this session?
No, I think it'll be a little bit more than that.
'cause you would be great to use some of it, but also you don't want to deplete it as
Right.
well, so.
Yeah.
No,
That's
but
why we went in with the
Yeah.
original budget.
Yeah, but we did discuss also, there are some other revolving funds that do have balances in
Yes.
them now, so it's not just the 20,000, right? There are other funds available there.
I consider this the dividend payback, the work that you do for the seniors that have spent a large portion of their life in town, supporting all the town functions, and now these are the dividends paying back to those individuals.
Which they
So
do often
thank you,
express.
Thank you. Yes, it's an
They
important
feel
function.
forgotten.
Though my question may be pointed, the service and the benefit to the community and the individuals are not lost on this group, so thank you.
Steve?
Yes.
Just one other comment. I think perfectly obvious to everybody on the advisory committee, but just maybe for the broader audience. Every senior family that we can help age in place and stay in town, the tax savings for not, what's the average cost to educate a student in Sherborn now?
From Ben Williams' fantastic analysis a number of years ago, noted this was 2015, I think.
I think we're up to 18 now, but I haven't run the numbers.
Well, sorry, I think he did his analysis in 2015.
Yeah.
But it was approximately $650,000 of home value per student educated.
Right. So that if we can help one or two families stay in age in place, there's a benefit to the town. I don't want to sound too much like a social planner, but it's hard to argue with the numbers.
Agreed and understood. So one thing what's really caught my attention here is the revolving fund. Certainly the increase of, the total net increase is significant, no doubt. You guys are aware of that. But I also recognize, as you pointed out, there is a increasing need for services to seniors. I do get, because I've been to a number of the meetings, that some of the seniors do definitely feel like we're still here and we've been here for a long time. Could you find funding from some of the revolving funds to offset some of these changes here? One of the challenges here is that it's, any increase to operating budgets, as you're well aware, gets compounded over coming years, right? And so where we can, and that's especially true in salaries. We as advisory and the town departments and budget makers, we've asked, and the department budget makers have done a darn good job holding the line on expenses the last couple of years, and in this year's guidance, we've asked them to do so again. I know that's a challenge. But because this is specifically a salary line item that's increasing, we know with cost of living adjustments, this is going to get compounded going forward. Could you guys find half of that from revolving funds as an offset, or?
No. The revolving funds for other programs are revolving. So they go in and they go out. The Rec Social revolving fund has a small balance, but, we're using that to pay for the senior cafe, which the costs have increased significantly. Used to be that a lot of groups in town would volunteer to provide a lunch every so often, and fewer of those groups are stepping up to the plate, and so we're providing lunches for these seniors. So the only real revolving fund that would have that ability would be the lifetime learning account. And as I said, it does generate a profit every year, and it for many years, it was never reinvested in the program. So that's why it's built up to $20,000, but it probably generates a profit of around $4,000 a year. So there's a limit to how much, we can start to chip away at that $20,000, and add.
No, you need a cushion, I understand.
Right.
Yeah.
So we looked at.
Steve? On the issue of revolving accounts, we're supposed to, if we're going to be putting salary items into a revolving account, you're supposed to also include the benefits.
Okay.
So these, I heard, were benefited positions. Right now, those aren't, I don't believe the benefits are included in the individual budgets. So to actually do the allocation of money to a revolving account, it would pull money out of another budget also to match the full cost of that portion of it. So if just hypothetically you wanted to take $4,000 and that represented, 10% of the compensation, you need to pick up 10% of all the other benefits. So the next thing you know, it's a $12,000 item and not a $4,000 item in the revolving account.
Okay, thank you for that.
So I guess the question is, if you were to use money from the revolving fund in order to offset some of the salary, like how would that actually be implemented? Like, at what point during the year would you decide, all right, we're taking money out of the revolving fund in order to, is this a decision that we make right now and we reflect it in the actual budget? Or is that a decision that is made sometime during fiscal year '21?
I'm gonna
Oh,
have,
I don't know. I'm not really sure. I mean, we could say that for the first, 40 weeks of the year, money will be paid out of the municipal budget, and then the remaining 12 weeks will be paid out of the revolving account.
For the
I don't know
5
how
hours,
it would, or just, so that it equaled maybe about 5 hours of her weekly salary over the course of the year. I don't know.
I would just say and this was just, maybe I was just making this up in my head, but my assumption had been during our conversation that that was going to be an offset against this budget, and that we would go in with a reduced amount in the
Right.
budget, taking from the revolving fund.
Right.
So I guess I would suggest that would be the way we do it, but.
Yeah, because I think personally, I think it's a good idea to put, whatever amount you are comfortable with, so that the actual budget line is reduced, because, not to reduce everybody to a line item, but, that's what we're here for, is we're trying to reduce the entire town's line items down to a level that all of the taxpayers should be more comfortable with. So knowing that, we could use money, that's good to know, but unless it's actually reflected in a difference in the number here, it's kind of like, that's nice to know, but.
Well, if we took 5 hours of her 25 and allocated that to lifetime learning revolving account, I think the savings would be about $7,500. But then this issue of the benefits, I am clueless about that.
I think we'd have to clarify that probably with Sharon and just how
How that would
get the
work.
calculation
Yeah.
and how we could get that to work. Because I think, and I understand why you guys are asking. I'm looking at, I do this at our meetings when we start talking about budgets, but just to digress just a little bit from the Council on the Aging, just looking at Sharon's model that she has for the year. Where budgets are at now, we would be seeing they're about 660,000 over guidance, and the tax rate would be going up by like 78 cents if we said yes to every budget that's out there right now. So that's why everybody's going to look for every little dollar that we can do, because we can't have a tax increase that high.
Thank you for that, George.
I just want to throw that out there, because the budgets now would put us well over $20 a thousand, from the 1946 that we had last year, and that's a not acceptable increase.
Correct. I would echo that, not acceptable. So can I propose the following? If you guys are able to take some of the hours from the program assistant and put it towards lifetime learning, and be able to reduce that bottom line salaries numbers by a number around there, I recognize that we probably need to check in with Sharon from Town Finance Director, who's unfortunately not available here at the moment, to figure out what the other costs may be, kind of what I think of as soft dollars. I think that would make this a lot more easy for us. I'm hopeful that you would still be able to get the services that you guys need for the seniors. But is that something that you guys are willing to take back and
Sure, yeah,
take a look at?
absolutely.
Okay.
I think I think that from our perspective, I think that sounds like the right thing to do as well. At least explore it. I know.
Yes, I think we're all in support of the programs and what you're doing for the seniors, the fact that the seniors deserve what you're doing and deserve more, given the percentage they are of the community, and we should be supporting that. So I think the issue is only how to best fund what you're looking for.
Right.
And trying to use the revolving funds, we may have to amend the definition in the revolving fund at town meeting. We may have to include additional items financially, so there's a little bit of legal work. It's hard to talk like a lawyer here, but
It's hard for you not to, Paul.
there's a little bit of legal piece that has to be, that we're not ready to commit on an actual number until we actually have the language of the revolver in front of us to make sure that this can be taken from the revolver, whether it has to be amended at town meeting, whether we have to have an article to amend it at town meeting, all that kind of stuff. So we don't have all the answers, but it's a long-winded way of saying I support what George is saying and what you're saying, and I think the board supports the notion of trying to minimize the impact on the taxpayers to the extent we can.
Okay.
Wonderful.
All right,
If there's no
thank
further questions up here,
you.
thank you very much.
Thank
for
you.
coming
Thank
back.
you.
For all that you do.
Yes, not just for presenting, but for what you do for the town. Okay, next, Farm Pond, Jeannie.
I don't know what they did to be at the top of the list. That's-
Are we
How did you
going
get at the top?
alphabetically?
Well planned.
I thought it was alphabetical. We start with the Cs, we go to the Fs, working our way down.
I don't see any Airbnbs here. Good morning.
Good morning. This is easy. We only get what we take in, and that's what we spend.
Easy.
I will say that the revenues for Farm Pond have decreased over the past few years.
Decreased?
Decreased.
Really?
In 2016, we took in 125,000, and last year we took in 106.
Yeah, that was a question I had, if I could, why the revenues have been going down. We've been
I
selling
think-
less?
I think a lot of people in town go away on vacation. They have other homes to go to. I don't think there's many stickers are being sold. Swim lessons aren't as popular as they used to be.
How big is a lottery for out of town?
The lottery brings in $37,000 a year.
How many stickers do
We
we,
sell 125.
could we increase
Could
that?
probably sell more.
Yeah.
Maybe
I
we
was
should-
thinking of increasing it to 150 this year, which would bring in another $7,500.
How many applications do you get?
Well, we get about, I don't know, 250. So,
Yeah, no, I think to gradually increase that, I mean, I go to Farm Pond a lot, my kids swim on the swim team there, and I think it's not that the beach is overcrowded, the only time it is crowded is when there's a swim meet and there's
Right.
cars from two different towns there.
so that is one thing that we were going to consider is possibly in going from 125 to 150. Several years ago, we went from 100 to 125. There didn't seem to be any, big increase of people down at the pond. We will have a few expenses this year to finish up the docks.
Yep.
We're going to increase there's a new ramp going to make it more handicap accessible to the beach. There'll be flags for the swim team.
Yeah.
That Recreation is going to pick up part of that cost.
Okay.
We need to have the roof done on the bathhouse.
Yes.
That, we've gotten one bid of $11,000, so that would be the most it would be.
Okay,
We're going for 2 other bids.
perfect. So is that a capital request formally since
No,
11? Okay,
no, we're
that'll be
going
just,
to
you
try
guys
and
gonna,
absorb that with the revolving fund.
okay,
The minimum wage is going up again. It's going up to $12.75. That has affected how much we pay, because once one goes up, everybody else has to go up.
Do you feel like you need increased revenue just to maintain level service, or do you think you're doing okay despite the decreased revenue?
I think possibly next year, we're going to have to either increase the price of stickers. We'll see how we go with this year. I don't see any major capital requests or any major capital items. The docks should be done this year. They've been a huge help. We even think they've helped keep the geese away from the beach because they don't like them. So that's where we're going.
When's the last time we increased the cost of the stickers?
It's probably, we went from, I believe, 70 to 75, probably about 5 years ago.
I mean, I don't see, that could be another, I think, things go up in price over the years, I don't
We
think it
could go
would.
from 75 to 80, and seniors could go from 25 to 30.
What's the out-of-town prices been?
The out-of-town is 300, so
Has it been 300 for a while? Or?
it's been 300 for, again, we started out at 250, we went up to 300.
I'll definitely advocate for at least an increase in the number of farm pond, maybe even more than the 25. Because just anecdotally, I drive past it probably like 3-4 times a week and go there and so on. I haven't seen the parking lot full, I think, in years.
No, the only time, again, the parking lot seems to be full is for swim
Swim
team.
meets, yeah.
And also the extremely warm days, which last summer weren't many.
okay. I too would be in favor of adding some either out of town or even a small increase. I'm a heavy user of Farm Pond, and $5 seems like a pretty good deal to me.
It's not a, for the, like, same as Steve, we go there quite a bit, and, you know, $80 is not a huge expense for the use of a great facility for the summer.
The only issue is that we already sent out the flyers within the excise tax bills that said that the stickers were 75 this year. So if the increase would be for next year. But if everybody's happy, I'll increase the non-residents from 125 to 150.
I think that makes sense.
Yes.
Any objections or?
Do you have any objection?
No, I'd increase the fee on you heavy users. That's-
A toll every time we come into the parking lot?
Any
You
other
get
questions?
everybody a transponder, like an Easy Pass.
Yeah.
and every time you drive into the parking lot,
I'm thinking
10
of-
cents.
I'm thinking ankle bracelets.
But then there'd be a gate there, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, no gates.
Okay, if no further questions up here, then thanks, Jeannie.
Thanks, Jeannie.
All right, see if we can roll best we can here. Next up is, where are we? Elder Housing. Unfortunately, Kitty is not going to be able to make it. I think Joe's going to be able to handle this.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I'm Joe Meany, a member of the Elder Housing Committee. Our chairperson, Kitty Sturgis, is recovering from some surgery. She's doing fine, but she couldn't make it here today. So I'll be here to answer any questions you have. Those, I think you all know, Woodhaven is housing for the elderly. We have 24 rental units, which stay occupied. The only 8 vacancies we have are, if it takes time between one person leaving and the next person moving in, we might lose a month here and there, but we're staying full. We are also a revolving fund, and we pay all our expenses, including a fee to the town, out of that revolving fund, so there is no impact on the town's operating budget. I think you all have a copy of our budget, which, just looking at the last number to start with, we have, the committee has voted a proposed budget, total maintenance budget, $243,040, plus a debt service payment of $38.50. So we would be want to withdraw $281,390 from our revolving fund.
What is the balance in your revolving fund?
The balance right now from the figures given to us by the accounting, our balance is $538,365. From that budget, from that balance, we have to pay our remaining budget for fiscal 20, plus what we're asking for 21.
What do you get for annual rents? What's the typical revenue that you guys have?
300, a little over 300,000 a year.
So your expenses are less than and that's the main question. I just wanted to make sure the expenses are less than the revenue, obviously.
And there's a wait list as well, isn't there? So you might have a month here and there between apartments, but you don't have apartment going on unrented for like 12 months. Right?
That's correct. We do.
Are you still doing renovations of units as they go vacant?
Yes, we are. We have 19 of the units have been renovated, so we have 5 left. When we first started doing this, actually goes back 2010, but we had a period where we had a lot of vacancies before we started that. This cleared that up, but then since 2014, we hadn't done another renovation till this year. because most of our residents are apt to stay there. We have turnover, but most of the turnover has been in the renovated apartments. But the renovations, I think most of you know, are, the town approved a bond issue of $500,000 to do the units. And we still have, let me just see, it's like we have about $30,000 in cash available to us should we have another rental unit come up, a renovation come up, and then we still have $105,000 we are able to borrow from that bond.
Is there an expiration on that bond, Heidi, that they don't ever, I know it's been out there for a while, like, when they can, okay, good. Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because I know some of these do have sunsets, so I wanted to make sure it wasn't expiring it. Okay, good.
Joe, I see in 2018 and 2020, the spike in the repair and maintenance, repair and replacement, were those renovation years?
No, because the renovations are not in this budget. Okay, that's in a whole separate article. That spike happened to be, that particular year in I think that year, let's see, that was
18 and 20. I see the,
One of those years you did a generator, right, Joe?
yes, but I also think in 2018, we did a lot of paving. So that was what bumped that up. In this current budget, 2020, that spiked up, but we have money in there we will be painting all the buildings this year, the exterior. And then there was several other miscellaneous items.
Joe, if I could, one of the issues I had was that the amount you're requesting is less this year than last year. And I've tried to figure out what was the reason for the decline. And as I looked at the items for 2021, they all seem to be higher.
Not repairs and maintenance. Repairs and maintenance is down by 20,000.
That's the big one.
Where's?
Yeah,
On the first page,
on the first page, Paul.
It went from 102.6 last year to 81.9.
Okay. Thank you.
I think this looks good to me.
Yes.
I'm very clear on it, and I do, as Peter pointed out, the, your annual repair and replacement costs do vary a lot, but I know you guys have that under control. It's well-planned, and you guys have it under control.
Out of curiosity, about how long is the wait list?
Do I need to get my name in now?
I don't know how long it is. I would guess it's probably like 20 names anyway. But the wait list, this current rental, I think we went down through 4 people before the 5th person was available to take it. Because many people are either in the process of would want to be selling their home or whatever. They're not ready to move when we have the vacancy. So, but and our list gives preference to Sherborn residents, and then secondly to Sherborn residents' relatives and town employees, and then people out of town. So quite recently, it's been mostly either residents or former residents and their relatives, parents.
One more question. What's the lifespan of the debt service? When do you think that'll reduce?
Heidi has given us a schedule. Let me just see if I can find that. it's fairly short. It keeps going down. When we were making large payments, because we were paying off not only the renovations, but older bond issues, we were paying off something like, we got as high, I think, as $90,000 a year. We're now down in the 30s, and this current schedule, I think, would go out through, through 2024.
Okay.
So as long as we don't need to borrow more money, that would hopefully be the end.
That's what I was wondering if it's kind of planned capital expenditures, like windows or water heaters or anything like that.
Well, we have a warrant article and we have a stabilization fund, which I think now we have $50,000 in. We have a warrant article to request another $25,000 be transferred from our revolving fund to the stabilization fund. And that's looking at things like, windows would be one of them. I'm just trying to think of what the other one was.
How are the roofs?
The roofs, excuse me. The roof is the roof is the one of more concern right at the minute. The roof, we keep getting checked every year or so, and it seems to be doing well. But as far as I know, the roof is at least 15 years old. I don't know anybody that has been able to tell me if we ever redid the roof. So if that's the case, the roof could be pretty old. We were built in, started occupancy in '83, so that's like 35 years.
Okay, thank you.
So yes, Paul, the roof is one of our concerns there.
Thanks, Joe.
Yep,
Okay.
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Are we taking any action on any of these? 'Cause
No, I think we do that at the
support
time
that budget.
of,
First will be the public hearing on March 14th, where we have to formally take a vote on each one.
we vote on that then, or, I mean, I guess we could vote on our budget separately before then.
Well, some of these budgets that aren't really dependent on the general fund.
We could vote to support. What we've done in the past years is I've waited till we've seen all, like, I like to look at the big picture. I want to see all the budgets before I vote on any budget. And by voting separately, then it's a confusion for David, which ones we voted on and which ones we haven't. So I'd rather just, after we've seen all the budgets, vote on them all at one meeting.
Okay. But this doesn't affect the general fund.
I know that, but
Okay.
for ease of, for David and Diane, let's all vote on all budgets at one meeting.
But is it possible to kind of preliminarily indicate to people that we like their budgets and other people that they need
Yeah, I
to
think
work on their budgets?
That's what we're trying to do, that's kind of the messaging we're trying to do here.
Said that about, yeah.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Brody. Please come on up, thank you. This is the Veterans Budget. Doug has already presented to the advisory committee, and we appreciate what he's done. He also needs to present to select board, so that's why Doug's here.
You'll have to bear with me because one of my veterans' benefits is hearing is disappearing.
No problem.
Thanks, Doug.
There's an explanation of what I'm going to talk about.
Thanks, Doug.
So I don't have to.
I think we have it in our packet.
I think you fellows have this. but it'll be-
Yeah, I think
We do, we've already seen it.
Thank you.
Again, for the select board's information, Doug did already present to advisory. We had no comments, questions, and just appreciate what he's doing for the town and for the veterans of the town. So,
Not mine. Okay, to begin with, there are no changes in the vet's budget this year. I always have been concerned about the veterans' benefit, the last item in my page there, because we don't know who's going to appear on and need some benefits. So I've always put in $3,000. I know that sounds high, but the point being that if a benefit is awarded to a veteran, it can be up in the thousands. the state pays 70% of it, we pay the rest of it, but we would be responsible for it. So that's just there as a hedge against that, and it goes back to the town, obviously, at the end of the time. The other interesting things on here would be the Veterans Day expenses, which that has been a very successful occurrence for us. We have, how many people, Diane, around 2,200 that come, I mean, about 120 that come to that?
Pretty close to 100 people.
Yeah, close to 100 people, which is up considerably than it was before. There are expenses associated with that, but a lot of that is offset by gifts from Roach Brothers, who gives us who gives us money against that. And also the invitations that I sent out have been printed at no cost for years by the Old Town Publishing in Medway. The Memorial Day events now are on my budget. They had not been before, had not been highlighted before. They were part of the Veterans Day expenses, but now it's a separate event. And that's when Mike Kickham is in charge of that, and that's when we march through town and go up to the veterans' graves. Everything else I think, is fairly well explained on here. There are no changes, nothing unusual that I see coming in the future, so I hope that this will be received by you and approved. Any questions?
Thanks, Doug. I think this looks great. Sorry, just said thank you for all you do, and this is, I mean, obviously it's the same as it's been every year, so I don't see any reason to do anything different, so thank you, but I really appreciate all the services that you do for the town.
Yeah, if I could, I want to add to that. As a participant both in the Memorial Day and the Veterans Day events, I want to commend you, Doug, for although you're thanking everybody else here at the end of your memo, we want to thank you for making it all happen and for doing so much for the veterans and for caring. You couldn't ask for more for a veterans agent than someone who cares as deeply as you have done. What a beautiful job you've done. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Doug.
Okay.
Okay, next up, we have the Historical Commission. Thank you for coming and presenting.
Oh, you're welcome. Peggy Novak, Historical Commission. Our budget request is very straightforward. We're requesting level funding from last year. It consists of 2 line items. One is $600 for maintenance of the memory statue. After we did a major renovation on the statue a few years ago, it was recommended that we get her cleaned, waxed, and inspected every year. So we added that amount into our budget. And the other line item is $700 for a continuation of a historic sign program that we started. For those of you who go to Farm Pond, hopefully you've noticed the sign that was put up last year with pictures and text discussing the history of Farm Pond. And our plan is to continue that program with other signs in significant locations around town. We have one in process for highlighting the cottage industries of Sherborn, which would be centered close to here. The sign will hopefully go near the parking for the library so that it's when the library is hopefully done.
We're not going there today.
No. But so that it's in a spot where there's a lot of foot traffic and people can stop and read it. And we're discussing other locations in town that would be appropriate. So that's the additional $700.
Okay. Looks certainly pretty easy for me, but please comment.
Well, just clarification, because I think you said level funding, but I think we have some information that suggests a decrease in the request, but you're requesting level funding.
$1,300.
Because last year it was 1,800, I think.
Yeah, they're down
At least that's
500.
the data we have.
Right,
It was.
That's what our
That must have been incorrect, the 2020
I think that
number.
was incorrect.
Oh, okay.
I'd love that, you know. If you want a level funded 1,800,
I didn't know if it was
we'd be
another,
happy.
if there was a special item last year for $500 that you guys used, maybe, but I don't,
No. No,
We'll clarify with Sharon when she's
Yeah,
back.
yeah. I do have it as 1,300 for 2020 and same request for fiscal year 2021. So current year 1,300, fiscal year 21.
that's what I have on the
Thanks for the
sheet.
$500 cut, thank you.
Yeah, by doing nothing, you reduced your budget by 27.78%, so good job.
So I should have just kept my mouth shut, right? I said, sorry, I can't come.
Okay. I don't think there's any further questions, Peggy. Thank you.
Thanks, Peggy.
Thank you.
Much obliged. Okay, Conservation Commission. Okay, we're at 9:35. Morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. I'm Kelly McClintock, 65 Woodland Street. I'm treasurer of the commission,
Neil Kessler, 43 Page Farm Road, I'm chair.
and we regret that Jean Bednar, who is our vice chair, who is the primary expert on the commission on the subject matter of our increase request, is sick in bed and wanted to be here, but says it's a bad idea. So we will try to make do. Most of our submission, most of our request is within guidelines, should be quite boring for you. The big item, of course, is the requested increase, and we would love to answer questions.
I just have one question for myself as a point of order. My wife is on the Conservation Commission. I assume that I should probably recuse myself from this discussion. Do I need to leave the room, or can I just stay quiet? Great.
Can you explain, it looks like you moved, you reduced the professional technical line item and expenses, and it's now up in the administrative assistant. Can you explain that
That was
change?
a mix-up in prior years. It's all been for the agent and assistant agent, but for some reason, once or twice, it got bounced around between bookkeeping numbers.
Okay,
It's all the same expense, it's all the personnel.
okay, so it should be on the, so it was mistakenly listed as an expense when it should have been a salary line item in the past?
Yes.
Okay. And then your increase seems to be mainly in the conservation property management, is that?
Entirely.
Okay. Is there certain properties, or is it just more reduction of the invasive species that you guys have been working on, or?
Sure. So it's actually for doing a land management inventory and analysis as a basis for future action like management and that kind of stuff, because basically we identified two very different kinds of parcels that we want to do this inventory on, because there's a variety of reasons, but most of them relate to new responsibilities and directives from the master plan for us to develop plans for land management for long-term economic benefits and ecological benefits. And so this is our way of getting started with that work.
Great. And hopefully, maybe, I know David, I think we're getting close on hiring the sustainability coordinator. Maybe you guys can work with them. Maybe there's some grants for this work that could reduce this increase in the, maybe there's some grants to help pay for that, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, that was my personal reaction to this, that the work, we certainly is worthy work, but to George's point and to Steve's point earlier in the day about where we stand, just with the budget and with the tax rate, nice to haves, it's hard to deal with those this year if it's not an absolute necessity, given where we are with the tax base. So if there is another source of funding, I think that would be really helpful.
How large is the Conservation Trust Fund at this point?
About 17,000 now, down from 29,000 when we got active with the CTF maybe 10 years ago. And just briefly, it's been used for a combination of opportunities and emergencies, one-time kind of thing. The best example of opportunity are the state matching grants, which we have leveraged very highly. Best example probably of an emergency expenditure from it was a couple of years ago when we had a very bad spring, trees down all over, and we had to hire a contractor to deal with the borders of the fields before they could be mowed. We have never used it for ongoing maintenance and management and don't want to.
One thing just to address, Jane, what you were saying. For us, I think that we've low-funded land management in the past because we've been able to. In a way, we've done sort of the bare minimum maintenance for most places, except for Barber, which was the work that's been going on there for about 7 years. It's been done on an all-voluntary basis, and it's not really sustainable because the folks that have been largely responsible for that activity, which has had real benefits for us. The Barber's really sort of our crown jewel. They're either moving out of town or their work responsibilities are making it so they can't spend as much time.
Or getting older.
Right, so lots of, life events. And so I think when we started to look at our budget and what we wanted to do for land management, for us, it's sort of a necessity we just put off for long enough that it seems like an addition, when for us in the past, I think we've looked at it as a deficit in activity. And I just went through, before coming here, to just look at what the responsibilities are under the implementation table in the master plan. And I counted up 59 items that the Conservation Commission is involved in, and 21 of which are things that we are supposed to take the lead on. I've got examples that have 1-year and 2-year timeframes, and they're all around starting to plan, starting to identify, starting to create maps and databases, because as everyone knows, our sort of rural heritage and our open space is a real sort of asset that we have, both economic and otherwise. And I think this work, in my mind and in the Conservation Commission's mind, I think is really essential. So
Can I ask a question?
Clear, I wasn't trying to question the value of the work, and I applaud you for being so diligent about wanting to maintain your responsibilities as laid out in the master plan. So I certainly appreciate all of that. This is strictly just a, if we look at the numbers.
If we can find
have some
grants, great.
issues.
Could I ask a question? You generate revenue from collecting fees. What is that revenue number?
There is a state fee, which is very small, which goes into a separate fund that can only be used for wetlands protection purposes, and that is under the control of the selectmen. The much greater portion of fees are from the town bylaw. Those all go into the town general fund. We don't use, those are not a revolving fund, they don't come to pay for us, they're the general fund.
But I'm just trying to get a sense of, thanks for the explanation, but I'm trying to get a sense of the dollar amount. In other words, for your budget, you're requesting X dollars. Are you actually generating 2X or 3X? Are you generating more money than you're actually seeking to have for your budget?
No. No, the bylaw fees, which as I said are the bigger, I think are on the order of 20,000, 30,000. But the problem is they vary greatly year by year depending on activity. And so using that as a budget support would put the town in a difficult position of changing the town share annually. We changed this a couple of years ago for exactly that reason.
Yeah, because of the bumps up and down.
Yes.
I was at the meeting where you had a very good, healthy discussion about the pros and cons of that, and you decided to maintain the current approach, which I thought made sense.
But it is definitely less than the total expenditures.
Okay, but just want to put it into context that some budgets we look at, there's no revenue. For your budget, you actually do generate some revenue. So it's not a total, trying to think of the right word, expense to the town. There are offsets. While it may vary from year to year, there still are offsets.
And I think, Paul, maybe your point is that the $6,400 increase that we have requested, that is more than covered by what those fees are. But as Kelly and some others have pointed out, if the town sort of traditionally has expected a certain amount of addition to their bottom line in the general fund, then taking $6,400 of that and putting it toward this increase means that there's that trade-off. So yes, we would cover it technically, just in a dollars and cents set, but expectations and what generally goes into the general fund from our activity would have to be offset by that increased expenditure.
So, excuse me. I apologize. I'm a little hoarse today. I'm the liaison to conservation, and I wanted to just add a couple of points of context. Excuse me. So, number one is that historically the commission has managed 500 to 600 acres of town land on a budget of about $6,000 a year. What's being called for here is a one-time fee that's going to be paid to consultants to take an inventory so that they can then manage the land going forward. This is not, this is not intended to be an ongoing expense. It's really a matter of ensuring that the dollars that do get spent are being spent for the right, for the right reasons. That's number one. Number two is, in terms of scale, I think it's important to bear in mind this is $6,000 out of a roughly $21 million budget. And I'm certainly very appreciative of the fact that if we say yes to everything, the tax rate is going to go up in a way that's just not acceptable. This is a case, though, I would frame this as a one-time expense that is going to align the activities of the commission with the town's long-run economic development potential. So if there, well, let me pause there.
Yeah, on that, Drew, I just want to, if it's a one-time expense, I'd be careful with putting it in the operating budget then. Just because next year when you go back, the baseline is then 13,000 on that line item instead of the 6,700, because if there was another line added to their budget called consulting, maybe it should go in there just so it's very clear that it is a one-time expense rather than part of their land management. So then next year when we look at the budget, and if people aren't aware like of what happened the year before, they're going to think the baseline's 13,000.
Yeah, Drew, you make a good point, and thank you for the clarification. I was going to say something similar to George. Is if this is a one-time thing, I'm more in favor of it than, quite frankly, the operating budget going up by that amount, which, as I pointed out, would be compounded continually. If there were a way to, and I was just making a note here, am I going to have to remember this next year at the same event? Again, for me personally, I'm much more in favor of this if we could find a way to ensure that it's a one-time cost that is somehow noted such that it's not part of the operating budget going forward. That would be helpful to me.
To be excuse me, to clarify the one time, we do not know what this is going to lead to. And this is an experiment. We do expect to be doing inventories and planning at other reservations. We don't know how much it's going to cost or how we're going to do it. But I would not want to suggest that next year at this time we won't be asking for other funds for a similar purpose. So this is one time to learn where we're going, but we're not going to fall back to our base $6,000 odd land management for the future.
And presumably there will be recommendations that will come out of the inventory that will be done that...
Interestingly, the recommendations, we don't know what the recommendations will be, but if, for instance, likely they would be recommending changes in the schedule or timing of our mowing or relocating trails, we can do that for free. It would depend on the kind of management recommendation that they come in with.
But there could be additional costs associated with the recommendations.
Yes.
So I think it's just something we should keep in mind going for the future.
Right, but I do think the point that it's one time in the sense that it is not something we're just baking into our budget as we go forward. The fact is that if we do this work and we find benefits for other reservations that come out of this work on these two parcels, then it's quite possible we wouldn't be asking for the same kind of money to do other assessments. We're also not necessarily targeting all of our other parcels, but sort of the most important ones are the ones that the public uses the most. And so, to Kelly's point, it's an unknown and it is an experiment, but at the same time we have been thinking about it and put it in the proposal that it is a one-time expense because we don't want to give the indication that we're just asking for an increase in our land management budget going forward, which we're not.
And I'd like to go back to Paul's point too, because I realize I'm not clear on the usage of the funds that comes in from fees. There is the Conservation Trust Fund, but that's separate, correct?
Yes.
So, is there a year by year, I'm not catching in what we're seeing here, an offset based on fees coming in. So is that something that does happen on a regular basis or not? Or how much is in that fund, that revolving fund, if you will, from the fees?
There is no technical revolving fund.
I do appreciate that. I'm using the wrong term, I know that. But
There are the state fees, which by state law are very constricted, don't enter into these numbers at all. They can't be used for anything else. The town fees, which Paul and I were talking about, can be used for anything the town wants to. That's revenue for the town. And it just goes into the general fund. It doesn't show up as an offset because we don't calculate those in any way in setting the budget or reporting the budget to you. And it would be very easy to include in our budgets what was received the year previously on bylaw fees. We could certainly do that. And I think it's around 20, 30,000.
So also to speak to, I think, some of the rationale, because they were just talking, Kelly was just talking before about how things have worked in the past. I think it used to be that when the fees came in, our funding came out of that, our budget came out of that. But because of the variability that he notes, it was very difficult for us to budget from year to year. So they switched over to this process where all of our bylaw revenue goes into the general fund, and then we have a budget. Am I understanding that correct?
That's exactly it.
So that's how it's changed over time. So now it looks more like we just get money out of the general fund from our budget, but it is, generally speaking, more than paid for by what the revenue is that comes in from fees for work in the town.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point that is not really obvious based on the way we see these presentations. So it's certainly something we should think about how we can maybe, better present that within our own.
Should we give you an accounting of the fees? Would you like us to?
That would be helpful.
Helpful, so we would know.
We could give you for fiscal 19 and year-to-date in fiscal 20.
I think that would be helpful.
That's certainly beneficial.
So would that be, just for clarification, it would be helpful to understand what the revenue to the commission has been over time. Do we believe that that's gating to approve this increase?
I do not. Okay. So others may have a different opinion. Here?
I think it's just good, for us, I wouldn't mind seeing that as well, just to, we have on the model, there's just a line item for local revenues. It'd be nice to see a little more detail on that. I'm sure Sharon could pull it up for anybody that wants it, so.
If I might just make a couple of more comments, or one question. In terms of this increase, is it simply that any increase at all over what it was in the prior fiscal year, is that the issue? Because I'm just wondering if there are ways to do one parcel instead of two. So if, I don't know what the sort of decrease in cost would be. We would have to talk with our consultant that we've been speaking with. I'm just wondering, is it a dollar amount problem, or is it just simply an increase problem? I don't know if you can speak to that.
I think they're related. I mean,
Yeah.
our guidance was flat expenses because we have a budget issue and we have, a tax rate issue, so to me.
So it's a
both,
question of every expense that goes up, but,
Yep.
I mean, there's also, I know that they have what did Ben call it, the pinata of money that can be used by different departments if it's justified, and I think you guys are justifying the expense, but we need to, I think the question is, everybody's gonna get questioned as an increase because it needs to be justified to take it to the taxpayers and say, yes, we're gonna use the money to do this.
But for me personally, seeing how the money you bring in relates to the money that you're expending every year is helpful, because to
Very
me, it
much
gives
so.
a better sense of what the net effect in town
Right,
is
cost to
of your
taxpayers,
budget.
yes, that's helpful to me too. In truth, I wasn't aware you guys even had any revenue, so just that statement is beneficial to me.
And then the one other comment I just wanted to make was that we really have been trying to take advantage of all the grants that we can. Kelly is the master of, DCR grants and relating the work that we do to the things that are important to them. And Conservation Trust Fund is the same thing. We've been, using it sparingly as we can, and while we can use that money, we also feel like we're robbing our own Peter to pay our own Paul. In other words, we're gonna take money away from something else to do something that's equally essential, and it just sort of speaks to the fact that as a commission, we feel a lot of responsibility for management of town lands and want to be able to do the best job we can, so.
I think I'm set over here if anybody else.
I would just comment that I think it's a one-time expense. I think if there was a separate line item that indicated a consulting service on a sort of a one-time basis, that I personally would support it, because I think it's a good investment in land management. We have all these properties, the public enjoys them. We ought to know how to take care of them going forward. Seems like a kind of thing we should be doing. And that it is offset, the commission does raise money for the town. So there is a net to be looked at as to what the taxpayers are really paying for the operation of the Conservation Commission. And it's a lot less than the money that's here, because I think you can informally, not as a gating function, but informally look at the fact that we have some departments that generate revenue. We have other departments that don't generate revenue. And so what the taxpayers are really paying is the delta.
It almost seems to me, so I'll open this up to other comments, questions. To me personally, it almost seems like rather than putting that increase in the conservation property maintenance line, it almost seems like a professional technical, which to me seems more like a consulting or some sort of consulting line, to Paul's point, would be beneficial on this. I don't know if there's a way to speak with Sharon and move that to a different line. Again, to these guys' point, make it known that there's kind of a consulting fee. Granted, it may not be the only consulting fee, but that there's not a core increase to the operating budget would certainly be beneficial, I think.
Should we pursue that with Sharon?
Yeah.
Yes, if you would, that'd be great. Any other further comments, questions up here? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. We're going to try to get in, so who's next?
Building inspector.
Building inspector, Chris. And what I was going to hope to do, guys, is after this, take a 10-minute break, if that's
Sounds
okay
good.
with everyone. Sounds good?
Good morning, everybody.
So that means you have 5 minutes, Chris.
No problem.
Steve, are we going to break for the Super Bowl?
I hope to be done by then. We'll even be done in time for the pregame.
I'm just asking.
Yes, we have.
All right, so the short version is essentially flat from last year, with the one addition of a recurring maintenance fee for a permitting software system which we have purchased. We received a grant from the state to purchase and set up a electronic permitting software and to provide 2 large format scanner printers, one for our office and one for DPW, to start dealing with the back catalog of paper plans and things like that, so we can take things in and digitize them. So that is a $10,000 recurring fee, which we can discuss whether we just want to absorb it into the current budget, which could handle that, or whether we want to adjust fees or other things to directly address that $10,000.
Is that going to be an ongoing fee every year?
$10,000 maintenance fee. It covers the cloud storage service that we have along with the software. It covers all the IT support, service, updates, you name it. It's essentially a software license.
So I think the Board of Selectmen with you should take a look at your fees and see.
There's potential there.
We want to make sure that we're comparable with other communities. We're comparable with other communities. We certainly don't want to discourage people from making improvements to their houses and so on in town. But if there's room in there to bring us to be pretty much on the level of other communities, we should we should take a look at that.
Yes.
That's a Board of Selectmen issue, and so let's ask you to point out the same thing I asked the Conservation Commission. You generate a fair amount of money for the community. Do you know what that number is?
I can tell you the building permit fees alone, the electrical and plumbing permits, I'd have to ask Sharon, and she's not here. So in, let's see, fiscal year 19, we brought in $240,000 in building permit fees. For the first half of fiscal year 20, we brought in $67,000 in permit fees. For 18, we did 120 over the whole year. We seem to be covering our costs effectively by just the building permit fees. The electrical and plumbing permit fees account for an additional few tens of thousands of dollars. Not huge amounts of money, but in the 20 to 30 range.
I have a question on the scanning
Mhm.
part of it. So part of it, I guess explain to me a little bit more, I'm not familiar. You pay a kind of a flat fee or a lease, and you get 2 scanners, and it goes into the
No,
cloud?
so the grant that we got allows the town to purchase the scanners, so the town will own that equipment forever. The software company has an initial setup fee to basically build the system for the town of Sherborn of $25,000, and then it's $10,000 in the servicing and maintenance of it over the year. So that initial $55,000 grant that we received covers $35,000 towards the software, and then an additional 20 that picks up 2 scanners.
Do you have an estimate on, between you and DPW, number of plans to be scanned?
We have an entire big corner of the vault downstairs. In my department, I know Sean has quite a few road layouts and other things that are over at his office. So there's, yeah.
Because in as part of the grant, maybe it's moved, but I have 2 thoughts. One, there's 2 devices versus 1. If it being of having 1 device. 2, I went through this something similar in my day job where we had a large volume of scans. We actually bought a scanner, did it in the health department we can, we gave up and outsourced it.
Right. The issue that we have is that we still have to take paper permits legally. And so if somebody submits a paper set of plans on 24 by 36 paper, if we're doing a digital record of all of our plans, how do we get it into the system? If they don't provide us with a memory stick or something like that with a PDF, we need to be able to scan it. So to be able to functionally meet the needs of the law, we have to be able to take a permit and put it into our system somehow. So that's kind of one of the reasons we needed to do this.
One question I have, and I brought it up with David beforehand. I know last year we voted, and my more question for advisory, for an IT department. And I'm wondering, whether we should be setting up a separate budget for IT for the whole town that this stuff all falls under, or we see these in all the different budget requests.
Deb might be able to answer if it's already set up or not, but I know that Sharon said that there would be a technology budget at some point. Right now, a lot of the things have been moved into the technology line of the town buildings.
Okay.
That we were moving to the selectman office.
Right.
And I'll say anecdotally, the public records law is not kept up with technology. They've made some provisions for like web pages and things that are electronic only, but the conversion and the ability to relieve yourself of holding on to paper files has really not been accommodated in the public records law.
Yes, I understood. So we will still have to keep the paper for the moment, but we can hopefully keep it in a place where we don't have to get to it very often.
Sean, I know you had your hand.
Chris didn't really mention this, but the ongoing software expense is just it's one module that's integrated with the same software we're using for the DPW and the assessors. People's GIS, that we're just turning on the module and programming the permitting software side of it. So he's covering his, my budget's always covered the expense of what we had originally with the stormwater. And of course, it's integrated with
Right.
the MS4 stormwater permitting and the mapping.
Which is another reason that we should have this all centrally located in one budget under IT, because it affects a lot of different departments. And, by streamlining that, we have one technology budget that I think is easier to look at. Because, again, another example is the financial software that's both in, the collector's office, the treasurer's office, the accountant's office. It makes sense that we have one technology line item for the whole town, then we can hopefully, over
With the
time.
benefits, less silos, I believe. was the
Exactly.
term I saw.
Exactly.
So, Chris, I'm sorry, I missed something. So the $10,000, is that going to be an ongoing every year expense?
Correct, that is a recurring expense, and that's why we can discuss whether we want to make alterations to the fee schedule, or whether we want to charge a convenience fee or something like that. Other towns have done a technology fee when they've gone to an online permitting system, so.
Such that when someone comes in and presents you with a 24 by 36 plan that's not digital already,
Yes.
you say there's a conversion fee or something like that, right?
So, something like that, or you can charge it to every permit that comes in. I mean, you're talking about a fairly large number of permits once you look at all the electric, plumbing, gas, and building permits. There's, 1,000 odd permits a year. It doesn't add up to much, maybe $10 a permit to cover the entire cost, if you want to go that route, or you can look at the actual fees for the permits themselves, and whether you just want to roll it into that. There's a couple different ways to skin that cat, and we have the ability to look at that number.
So that's an example that if we had a more holistic view of our technology needs, we could see, well, here's where we could generate some fees, here's where we can't. Have you had discussions, it sounds like DPW and your organization are both using this. Are there any other town departments that could benefit from it?
Well, so all the town departments that we interact with right now will see a benefit from this software. Assessing is one of the big ones, where it automatically updates them with the status of permits being issued. It gives them access to see where the inspections have been done and where they haven't been done. That tends to get, projects get delayed, and so they don't know to go out and re-inspect. So this automates a lot of that functionality. It connects directly into the collector's office, so that it sort of puts all the data in one place in a way that we've never really had it done before. It makes it so that, the Board of Health can approve a project by clicking approve, as opposed to having to have this kind of ridiculous paper trail that we have now. So that it's a huge convenience for everybody working in town hall. It puts all the information out there in a way that, as town departments, we have great access to the data, and as a public, it also becomes a public portal for all this data as well. So people buying and selling their houses, realtors, you name it, they all can come in and look at the permit history on all kinds of properties, and have access to the public side of the software. So it should be a real win-win for both the town and the public using it. Plus the fact that you can apply for a roofing permit at 11 o'clock at night in bed if you want to. That's,
I would hope that, you said the Board of Health, the Board of Health would use this as well, hopefully.
So they use, the way that we interact now, they approve all of my permits via a sort of a paper-based tracking system that we use, and this would allow that to go away, and they would be approving it within the software system. If the Board of Health wants to issue their permits via this system, then there's an additional module that you tack on it to pick up another department. So
But if they had plans that they needed to scan in, because, for instance,
yes,
when I put in a new septic system 14 years ago, and then I needed to have it pumped, and I didn't know where to go, they
Yes.
still didn't, the
So-
Board of Health had no record of my revised plans, so.
Well went dry.
yeah.
So I'm hoping that if we had a digital record of all this, even in the Board of Health, they could
One of the
use it as
things
well.
that we did when I had the software in Medfield was that we found a way to add non-permit related documents, but just things that are of interest of a specific property, directly to that file, so that, the original planning board A&R plan that created the lot, it doesn't exist in our building file necessarily, but you could then add it to that property file so that you can see where it came from. The Board of Health files could easily be loaded up as another layer of data that you could pick up for that property. Conservation approvals, I mean, you name it, it sort of lets us put everything all in one big folder.
Oh, good.
It's a real nice approach to having a sort of centralized registry of information, as opposed to all these different file cabinets around town hall.
Right.
So
I
what is
think
the-
it's, excuse me, Jane, I think it's fair, reasonable, and justifiable to match the incremental cost with a matching revenue to the benefits bestowed to building, the electrical, plumbing services for the advancement of technology. So I would encourage looking at a add-on fee for this new technology where you mentioned the win-win-win-win-win all strung out, bestows a benefit to all.
What is the total cost of the software maintenance?
$10,000.
Okay, because Sean, I thought you said you already had your usage of it built into your budget, so I just want to make sure we're
Oh,
not
so,
double counting.
well, each module is billed at a set, for each department gets a separate line, and depending upon what it's doing, I mean, if you want to do dog licensing through it, they have a dog licensing module. It costs a different amount than the building amount, so for my piece of it, it's $10,000. For Sean, I'm not sure how it works out, but the two, you don't really see a big savings by doing, crossing the two departments together. It doesn't seem to make too much of a difference to them. You could buy one module or you could buy 10 modules, but the pricing basically stays the same.
But are we sure, and this sort of goes back to the central IT budget, are we sure that we wouldn't get a discount, if we were doing a town-wide negotiation?
They're treating us as one customer.
Okay. Okay.
It's one person we deal with for the company.
Yeah.
One contract.
Jeannie?
I believe we get a bill from GIS every year for $7,500. I can double check that, and that covers the layer for the assessors, and it could even cover the yours.
It does, it went up this year, because it's an add-on we had to do for the MS4.
But we do get it fairly invoiced.
And Deb, do you know how is that split between departments as now, or?
I'm not quite sure where it gets, where it is charged right now. I think it gets taken out of the technology line.
In the buildings?
In the town building, there's a
Okay.
line item.
Yeah.
And so this would be an additional 10,000 under building inspector rather than 10,000 on top of the 7,500 that's coming in currently.
Just legally, it's better if we're going to do a fee increase and charge people for this, to include it in the departmental budget, because in order to justify the fee, you have to show the costs versus the fee, and if he's gonna be charging it, to have the costs to support the fee it's a good foundation legally in case it's ever challenged.
Though could you not, for purposes of kind of keeping the books, you could track that the cost of the software is allocated to certain departments, though we still have it run via a centralized IT department?
Yes, you could.
I certainly see the need for this. I love the fact that you got a grant to get the printers in place. The $10,000 increase is obviously big. You've heard us say that about smaller increases already today. You are obviously a revenue-generating department, and I wouldn't say this lightly, but so you do have the potential, and I don't know what the process would be, to slightly increase fees on some of the permits to help offset some of this, right? As Jane said earlier, I wish as part of what we have in front of us at the moment, we had your kind of top-line revenues, though you started them off pretty easily, so thank you for that.
Any other comments over here?
No, I think we should implement the fee. That would allow when you're doing the recap sheet, to show more local revenues that would offset this cost and therefore wouldn't affect the tax rate.
Right. Chris, if you could at some point come to one of our meetings and I'd like to see a comparison of what we charge for inspections, and I know you said other towns charge this technology fee. Let's compare and make sure, we're in line with what other towns are charging for their.
I did a quick version, and I can bring this to the board and we can discuss it further, but, there's sort of two mechanisms. Do you adjust the total permit fee percentage of value that you're taking in, or do you just add a flat fee, And they have their merits, each one, Right now, our minimum fees are relatively high compared to other towns, but our rate per thousand is relatively low compared to other towns. So we can certainly take a close look at how that presents itself and what it does. But either way you do it, it's a relatively simple procedure to cover what amounts to not a huge percentage of the incoming money.
Well, what I would suggest, George, is not just look to recover the $10,000.
Oh, no.
But we ought to regularly take a look at the overall fee situation. It may be that there's 100,000 we should be collecting.
Right.
Yeah.
We compare ourselves.
That was my point, absolutely. That it was the same discussion that we had with Jeannie. I mean, I think every department, if there's opportunities for additional revenue, we should be looking at that and make sure that we're on par with our surrounding communities, because builders here are pulling permits in other towns, so, we should be in line with what other towns are doing, and if we're low on, like you said, the per thousand, then maybe we should be increasing those fees.
Up here in advisory, are there any other comments or questions at the moment? You know, it's $10,000. That's a big increase, right? And as we've noted, we are doing our darndest to hold the line. And there's obviously discussion of the potential to raise fees, but that's not kind of hard baked in here yet. You know, but it looks like there's the potential to offset at least a portion of this. Thoughts or comments up front here?
Personally, I think we need to do it, but I would like to see us move toward a centralized IT budget so that we can have a.
I agree with you, Jane.
Lou, did you want to add anything?
You know, I wanted to respond to something that I thought I heard in the discussion here, which is about the relationship between revenue requests and, spending requests and revenue generated by departments. I do think it's valuable to see what departments are generating in terms of collections. I would be careful to delineate between the question of, you know, what is happening on the revenue side, the quote-unquote revenue side, especially for departments that are operating, or rather, for departments rather, where collections drop into the general fund. I would be very careful to uncouple that from the consideration of, is this an expense that we want to fund?
I thought that too, and I don't want to make it seem as though departments with a avenue of revenue should be treated any differently than other departments who don't necessarily have a revenue. That's certainly not what I mean to imply. Just kind of in general, you know, this sounds in a tight fiscal budget, as George mentioned, the initial asks from the departments would put our tax rate extremely high. So where and when we can find offsetting revenues, be that housing projects or whatever fees, we need to look at it. So, but to your point, Drew, I don't mean to necessarily link spending with revenues.
Okay, yeah, and I think it's, you know, just maybe to put a little bit finer point on it, and then I think we can be done. I would not consider any monies that drop into our general fund to be quote-unquote offsetting revenues. That's, you know, those are amounts that can be applied to any expense, and we should evaluate what, you know, how they get applied to those expenses based on, you know, the merits of the expenses.
And I think the point is that we were talking about is if all the departments look at their fee structure and if there's ways to increase that general fund revenue, we should definitely be looking at that if it's justifiable and keeps us on par with what other towns are charging.
Okay. So I think here, the request is to just get a little further info about just the revenue generate to help us with it. I don't think there's any advice to change this out of your budget, so, right. So with that being said, thank you, Chris.
Thank you all.
I'm going to ask for a 10-minute recess, I believe is the term. We're still formally in session, just so we're clear. We're going to take 10 minutes water break. Perfect. We are back here at 10:32 or so, and the next budget up for review is the Select Board, which will be presented, I believe, by David Williams.
Hey, Steve, thank you. There weren't many changes to this. It was all in salaries, so the expense lines we kept flat.
Thank you.
So any increases you see are all up in the salary lines. Those were adjustments due to the creation of the sustainability coordinator position, and we budgeted that at $38,000. And then we're getting some offset from a state grant for that, which would be $25,000.
So sorry,
But
20,
not for
25 of the expected 38.
But it'll probably be gone by the end of the current year. So whatever is left over would be going into the following year, but we won't know until we actually hire the person and negotiate what the start date and the starting salary would be. So we've already held one round of interviews, and the second round of interviews is this coming Monday. So we should be able to have that all decided within the next week or so. Part-time help, we increased some. And the rest is the COLA, the 2% COLA that was included, and an adjustment for the classification and compensation plan that the Personnel Board had worked on. So those were the, those total up to all those increases.
David, what's the procedure if somebody believes they deserve a market-based adjustment to their salary? Be it employed, appointed, or elected?
It's a good question. First, the people with contracts are typically 3-year contracts, so it would be negotiated once every 3 years what those increases would be. The union folks, same thing, contracts. So you're really looking at a small number of non-union people that could happen to. So usually if we have a situation that requires like a mid-year adjustment, it would only be temporary until it goes through the budget process and then gets approved at town meeting. So say there's an employee that walks in with another offer that's been, a 10-year employee here, and we're looking at it and saying, can we, based on everybody else, can we make that adjustment without throwing everything off? And then you review it and say you want to do that adjustment, you implement it temporarily. And you have to tell them this is temporarily and it can be reversed. You put it all in writing that it can be reversed if it's not approved, through the budget process. Sometimes you can put it off and say, we'll ask for the increase in the budget process and not have to make that increase right there in the current year. But when they're coming in with another offer and it's an employee you want to keep, then it's different from an employee that you're okay choosing someplace else to work.
And like there's a few elected officials that have salaries, and those are set, as you know, every year at the budget process, like they're in their department budgets.
And so is there a process for those elected officials?
Those are,
non-union?
well,
those are set.
Those are just when you guys vote on the budgets, or when the town votes on the budget, you set their salary for the year.
Yeah, the elected officials, their salary is one salary amount set by town meeting. So say it's $50,000. Doesn't matter what the job ends up being, that's what they're going to be paid. Doesn't matter whether it's 10 hours a week, doesn't matter whether it's 70 hours a week. That's all we can pay them, is what town meeting approved. So we kind of use an hourly rate for those and treat them like the non-union positions, but they're more treated like a salaried position, where there's one salary for the year, you're paying it out every 2 weeks to them, and it doesn't fluctuate by the number of hours that the job is. So the elected ones are more of a salaried, even though they're not a 40-hour week.
And is there any process for market-based evaluation, whether we're under, over, at?
In the bylaw, the Personnel Board is charged with reviewing the compensation. So I think it had been about 10 years since it had actually been looked at to be adjusted. So for the past 2 or 3 years, a lot of places would go out and they would hire a third-party outside consultant, and it would be $30,000 to $50,000 for them to come in and go through the whole process. With this Personnel Board, we thought we could do it internally, but that's why it took 2 or 3 years. So basically, when you looked at everyone's salaries, actually the first step we did was come up with a rating manual, so that there would be a standardized rating of all the positions. And so then all the job descriptions were updated and made to reflect the current positions. And then we went through with this manual and scored all the positions. And then you list all the positions and their scoring, and then you decide what sort of categories you want. So we got to that point, and then we decided the ranges we wanted to assign, like an hourly range, like say $25 an hour to $45 an hour for this group. And once we decided the ranges, the cost to move everybody into those ranges was like pushing like $60,000 or $70,000. So we knew that's not what we intended out to do. We intended out to try to adjust those that were the most egregious problems that hadn't been addressed. So there were several adjustments we did to the ranges and the hourly rates associated with those ranges to get it down under 20,000. So that was a year and a half ago. And some of those adjustments have been done like incrementally, and some have been done at just different times. So some were made into the budget this year already. All except, well, there are no more to do. They're all included in these budgets. So whatever's reflected in these budget requests is what the result of that. And I think it's only affecting 2 or 3 positions that wouldn't have already been adjusted for the current year.
So Peter's question for an elected official, if I'm an elected official and I think that I deserve an increase or I want a market increase, I have to do it through the budget process and then get it approved at town meeting. Is that correct?
The elected official would have to put what they think their salary should be and then bring it to advisory. It doesn't come to the select board.
Right.
But, and then it goes to town meeting, and then it's approved or adjusted or rejected at town meeting. And what you use as the justification for that is what's going on in the department, such as need additional hours because of X, Y, Z, and the salary kind of calculates out to an hourly rate, so that times the number of hours I need adds 5,000 to my budget, so I'm asking for 5,000 more on top of my existing salary. So they're just dealt with a little differently.
So can I just correct something here, that the Board of Selectmen is not paid? So even though there was a reference that if we were paid, we're not paid, zero. For the voters.
Actually, buried in here is a 100% increase in our salary. It's 100%.
Can you justify that?
I'll definitely get the money's worth.
So we actually, in the classification plan, which is in an appendix form to the personnel admin plan that's contained in the bylaw, we'll be updating that with an article this year. So you'll see all of the positions listed out, which we haven't had for a long time. What's been in there hasn't been helpful, and it's been very incomplete. So this will be a comprehensive list of all the positions showing what grade they're in, and the elected officials are still in their own category. They're not into the non-union grades yet. So.
Jane, do you have something?
Well, just a clarification on the elected officials. So does that mean that, since it goes through the budget process, does that mean that the normal approval by the HR administrator and the personnel board would not apply to elected official increases?
An elected official could go get the input from the personnel board, but the personnel board has tried to get away from making judgments on the hours of setting hours, because they're deferring to the dollar amounts is driving what we can afford, and relying on the department head for them having the most expertise about running their operation. So they have to justify it, not the personnel board. So they've tried to get away from those things. So sometimes I get somebody bringing in a job description that might say 25 hours and they're going to ask for 30 and they want to increase it to 30. Personnel board doesn't really want me bringing in that job description if the only thing that changes is the hours limit. And sometimes I'll bring it in and then just have them change it so that it's, maximum 40 or whatever. But they have tried to get away from those individual hour assessments because it does get, this really is the form that says yes or no, not what their assessment is. And if you want an opinion from the personnel board, you could always kick something to them and ask them for input on it, and then they would look at it. But does that answer?
Helpful, thank you.
Okay.
As far as the salary increases here, so I remember last year during the calendar year, there were a number of roles that got salary increases based on the personnel board's recommendations and this multi-year process you've been going through. So these increases here under Board of Selectmen or Select Board and Town Administrator, these are kind of some of the last personnel increases or kind of part of that process, I guess I should
So the
say.
last ones that we were addressing, we were holding on and seeing what, what we were going to do. They were a little more difficult. They also needed some other analysis that the state requires. There is an analysis that's required for that shows gender disparity between the salaries that the town is offering. And there was a significant disparity in several of the positions. So those, you have an adjustment that is part the classification compensation plus this parity issue that's also getting adjusted. But we're looking forward to having it all behind us. And we've gotten through it without any major fights, which is unusual too, if you've been through it or seen it in some other community. It's a year of stress and upset from the employees, and we've done pretty well to get it, to get their input without making it a huge public fight. I think that's what it usually ends up with the employees. That's a jaded view, but I've been through it 3 times, so that's
So then I think you've answered this, but I just want to make sure I understand properly. So there are a couple of increases that were somewhat significant over last year, and you're saying that's part of a process that has been going on with the Personnel Board. Did I understand that correctly, that even though some adjustments were made in FY20, there are some additional ones that are new for FY21 based on the process, is that correct?
That disparity analysis was not a required thing from the state until, well, within the last year. And that's when it was done. A lot of communities haven't done that analysis because they know it's not going to be favorable. But we had so many few positions that we thought would be affected because we had just done the classification. And it was true, it was only 2 or 3 that stuck out. And those are the ones that got adjusted.
And you expect $25,000 of a grant to cover the grant writing position?
The 25,000 is a total, which he said, we're gonna not, that's for the sustainability coordinator, which is probably gonna be starting in the next month or so,
right.
What's left of it?
Yeah. Okay.
So out of that
We'll cover
25,000.
what's left of fiscal year 20.
Yeah, in the current year.
And into fiscal year 21.
Yeah.
We'll pay 100% of that salary for the current year, whatever that number of hours and pay ends up being. Will be paid out of that 25, whatever's left over goes into reducing the amount for next year.
Do you know, this may be more of a question for Sharon, who isn't here, but is there going to be a way to track sort of the grant revenues that are specifically brought in by the sustainability coordinator?
Oh,
sorry.
Is it someone's talking?
Yeah. Because I know the way that this position was pitched to the town was that it was going to be revenue positive,
right?
Possibly in year 1, but I don't think that was probably realistic. But it
Yeah.
would be nice to know, okay, what is the actual effect of the sustainability coordinator, so that we
Right.
can decide, is this something that is going to go on in perpetuity or not?
Yeah, part of the position's job is to justify itself. So the person who's in that position is going to have to be showing the results that they're generating for that position, similar to what, the building inspector would be doing. And then they could explain how they've done it or the different programs. But that's what we'll be looking to. And in Sharon's reports, I'm not sure where she accounts for it in a revenue report, but there should be one list of all the standard revenue items and it plugged in there somewhere as an offsetting revenue. But that would be on the whole big picture, not on a department basis.
Okay.
And when do you estimate that the sustainability coordinator will start?
I would hope within the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Okay.
So by March 1st, it'll be.
Yeah, depending on how much, if they have to leave another position or if they can just pick up these hours. So I'm guessing a couple of weeks.
But it sounds like we should assume 4 months' worth of salary will come out of that $25,000 grant, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so salary is certainly a large jump, but if I may take a moment, go down to the expense items, David. There's the consulting services line, which is certainly variable. Last year, current fiscal year is at 27.5. The request for next year is the same, 27.5. Is there a specific contract to which that is dedicated, contract or contracts to which that is
For
dedicated?
consulting services?
I think we keep that line item in there. It's kind of if Sean's department needs a engineering study or it's a way for us to be able to pay for engineering or.
But it's basically all departments.
Right, all departments kind of come to us if it's a way that we don't have to go to the reserve fund for every little study that needs to be done or engineering report. It's something that we
know that planning board is going to have certain consultants, maybe some small engineering studies. Board of Health is environmental consulting.
I know, for instance, like Sean's doing some surveying with the Pine Hill Lane.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing can come out of this. And
so some of the general chemical consulting was paid for out of this. Some consulting engineering that was to do with the ball field study, I think, was paid out of this.
Historically, in the last few years, several Board of Health requests.
It's been primarily land use and environmental related.
I'd point out that most of my towns have a town engineer. They have a whole town engineering department. And that you have before you a department head saying, I'm the town engineer, I want X hundreds of thousands of dollars for the upcoming year because I provide engineering services to all these boards and committees in the town. We don't have that. So what we have to do, we can't operate without engineering assistance from time to time. No town can. So what we do is we contract for that. So it's like the legal line item. You have to have a line item somewhere that allows us to essentially have a privatized department of people that we can bring in to assist us where we need it on, provide that engineering service. We're not proposing to hire a town engineer and go that way.
No, but we don't have a town engineer, but we also don't have town sewer or town water. So there's certainly less need for a town engineer too, but I see your point here with having this fund available for some of the smaller consulting projects that do pop up time to time.
Is there any possibility that some of this money could be used for the Conservation Commission consulting that we talked about earlier?
I didn't hear that.
Can it be used for the Conservation Commission consulting? Remember their increase was related to that.
Yeah, they have been pretty good about using their funds. I think they have something coming in front of you.
Use the trust fund that we were talking about.
Yeah.
It still has 17,000 in it, so that may be a source of some of the funding.
Right.
Yeah, but I know they have been to us before for amounts to come out of
Yeah. That's a good point, though. I mean, that 6,500 increase, instead of them increasing their budget, they use this for that one-time expense that they were talking about.
Often
Yeah.
communities who are facing 40B developments use consulting services. Some of those charges can be imposed on the applicant, but a lot of, there are categories of charges that can't be. It has to be funded by the community. So.
There's state, I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, there's also state assistance to help the communities with that as well, correct?
To some extent, the state assistance is supposed to help us get to granting a 40B. And it may well be there's a couple of projects we're dealing with right now that the board has voted to oppose. So we may be in a position where we may be opposing those two projects. We need to have something to assist us in that opposition.
Okay, what I would just reiterate here is that, as we discussed with some of the other departments, right, it's every dollar counts because the proposed budget is so far above guidance and would put us at a tax rate that is very high. And so, granted, I see the salaries based on recommendations, and I see the expenses here. And I'm trying to find if there's any place within the select board budget, town administrator budget, that we could cut back something of significance to offset at all. That's what I was looking for. And I don't want to ask select board to ask for reserve fund transfers when you need to do a small consulting project, or, I get it that you need funds to be able to quickly execute some of the services that the town needs under a general heading of consulting services. Again, I just see the overall large increase, and there's just one other line item that strikes me that would have some potential variability, and that is it.
I guess one question is, you have 27.5 budgeted for fiscal year 20. Are you anticipating that all of that is going to get used, and therefore you would need to keep that flat for 21? Or could we move back towards the, let's see. Well, I guess there's a question there. Actual 2019 says 895. That seems like that's probably not correct, because in 2018 it was almost 20,000.
When you get to the end of the year, the finance director and the administrator will go down through every line in the budget to make sure that everything is charged to the correct place. And sometimes at year end, you can do a lot of transfers where you say, oh, that was paid for consulting here, but that was specifically for the library, and you can move it.
Mhm.
Or this was actually consulting that had to do with litigation that should have been paid out of the legal budget.
Okay.
So there's a lot of moving around, and I think that's what happened on that.
I see.
That year. But
I see what you're saying, Stephen. I just, I think, as Paul mentioned, as you guys know, we just wrote the letter to Mass Housing with those two 40B projects, and I would be hesitant to cut our consulting budget when we know there's a project on our doorstep that we're probably going to need to be spending money on in the near future.
Yeah, I hear. I kind of thought that was going to fall under legal, which I know has a lot more leeway. So.
Well, I think we'll also have to hire, we'll probably be hiring engineering or traffic studies or something like that, if
Right.
that kind of thing would fall under that.
there are legal expenses that are already being incurred, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
Which is not in this line item.
Are there any comments on this aspect of the budget, guys, from up front here? Okay. Again, that's a tough number to swallow, but let's continue on. David, are you presenting the other, anything else within, of course, select board and town administrator, or is this it for the moment? Or
The insurance is
Oh, sorry,
just-
the
Yeah, I
insurance.
usually
Thank
talk
you.
about the insurance.
Thank you.
Diane handles the day-to-day insurance. So she could handle any questions that are specifics about how do you do something or why does it cost something. But general insurance is, our carry is through Maya. And everybody's familiar with Maya, I think. So we've been with them, I think, for like 10 years for general insurance. And we do go out and look at other quotes. The problem is there aren't a lot of insurance companies that want to quote municipalities. So you end up with maybe 2 or 3 other companies, and of those 2 or 3 other companies, you'll probably get a no from at least one. And then the process to get a quote is a very long process. So if you're getting modest increases, it's almost better to stay with them, with the whole consortium of all the other municipalities, rather than go out on a private carrier.
So if I could just add to that, it is the municipalities who created Maya. Maya is owned by the MMA, Massachusetts Municipal Association, and it was created because municipalities were having difficulties getting private insurers to provide the kind of coverage that municipalities needed, not only on dollar amounts, but on scope, and not just on general liability, but on health insurance and the like. So in essence, you all own this insurance company because it is directly put together by, I'm trying to remember what Abraham Lincoln said, for municipalities. And an effort is made to keep the costs as close, keep the premiums as close to the costs as possible.
And is the 7%, is that what Maya is estimating the increase will be?
It looks like it's gonna be pretty close to that, it's gonna be a positive 7%, yes.
Okay. Because that's kind of a number that's handed to us, I know, on the benefits as well. Well, employee benefits, they give you an estimate at the beginning of the year that says, this is what we're estimating the increase is going to be, and I think that's how we budget it.
It's not a quote yet, but.
Yeah, it's not a firm quote, but that's just our
It'll be in the
estimation
next
for the budget.
2 months, probably.
One question, one comment. Paul, I applaud your memory of conversations with Abraham Lincoln. That's amazing. The second is we had the consultant that came in that said, let's modernize the benefit package. Not necessarily change who's the carrier is, but propose newer ways to hold under the individual mandate of Romney Care, Obamacare, the employees as informed consumers. And that meant a lot of things with different products, possibly networks, possibly high deductibles, but there were a lot of tools in the toolbox to bend the cost curve of health care. And that was about 4 or 5 months ago. And she was a very nice woman. Did anything come of that?
Yes, and you're speaking of health insurance.
Which is not in this line item, but.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, this is just general insurance, but.
General,
Yeah.
all right, property liability.
Yeah, we've currently given notice to the Insurance Advisory Committee, which is represented by each union of the school department and of the town. So we've given notice to set up a meeting where this Sue Shalou will be there to go over what the what the package is that would be proposed. And Sue Shalou in executive session has already reviewed and come up with a package with the Board of Selectmen. And we can, I think we can share that because we had identified that there would be a few of you. So if you didn't get that proposed package, then I can send it to you.
But that's underway, so.
Yeah, we've been working with her,
Yeah.
so.
And it's no surprise, it's changes in, the co-pays and levels of service.
Which should hopefully result in savings to both the town and the employees.
Thank you.
But I will get that to you.
So, the group health insurance, obviously down for the years. Is that again based on,
That's not in here.
oh, that's not part of this one?
That's not, that's a.
Searching through the Vadar budget.
Off the top of my head, it was I think it was not a great year.
Yeah, we're actually, I was
And
gonna say, what we spoke to Sharon about is different, so.
8 to 10% maybe, off the top of my head.
Employee benefits is kept out of the, it's almost a separate line item, I think, in the, it's not, I'm trying to figure out where it is, but it's like below the line, you know what I mean? It's
Yep.
like another line item that's not within all the departments. I don't know why, but that's, I think because it's something that's.
It's usually in an unclassified department.
Right. Whereas this line item that we're discussing right now is just the town's, property, auto. Casualty, yeah.
Thank you. As I pull it up in Vadar and search, it kind of all starts popping up together, so.
But we do have a group health insurance
Yes.
summary, and it's showing a decrease
Right.
of almost 4%. So what would that be? At least the data that we're seeing here.
Yeah, I
But
can't
then we have-
imagine it being a decrease, but.
Yeah, 'cause it's under, if you look at her big spreadsheet where she has, the operating budget line items, we're looking at general government, schools, public works, and the insurance employee benefits, she has that flat in here right now from 3,273,000 to 3,273,000. From what I'm seeing on her last, I think it was version 5 of the budget model.
Yeah, again, there's, we have a new accounting system that's been implemented across the town, I think very beneficial, but at the moment, there's some different numbers. I think it's a categorization issue.
Okay. Yeah, because I think this liability and the property and liability insurance falls within, the general government expense, whereas the insurance employee benefits is a
Yeah, no, that is.
whole other.
Yep.
All year.
Can I ask again, which report are you looking at that had less
I
drop in?
believe this is the printout from Vadar, and it's what Vadar is showing. Is it, would you agree
Category
with that, Steve?
914, yeah, that's one.
We don't have that in our books per se, but.
That's under group health insurance, EMP group health insurance, category 914, so. Department 914. But I agree, going back to the actual kind of spreadsheet that we are based off of, the employee benefits overall. So you guys are looking at general insurance on this, okay?
Yeah.
Clear.
Which is a line item of only, this is, 176,000 versus the
3.01.
3.2, whatever.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Further questions on insurance?
Yeah, what's the auto insurance that started in 2020?
I think that's just accounting. We didn't, we've always had auto insurance.
Might be just a separate, a change in categorization. I see what you're talking about, Wasim.
Yeah. Was it carried, Rick, was that carried in the police department prior, or don't you know?
No.
Sorry, auto insurance. We have it, it was added to this in 2020. Was it taken out of maybe your budget, or or Sean? You guys are the ones with all the vehicles.
No. Deb could,
auto insurance, okay.
Deb could probably answer it, but auto insurance, all auto insurance is out of this line.
Oh, you know what? Look at the line item. If you look above, Wasim, police and fire went down that year from 53 to 33, so I bet you they broke out auto insurance from the police and fire line item.
But it still would have been in the insurance.
Right, it's still under insurance, not under your budgets, but I think they broke it out as a separate line item from police and fire is what it looks like to me.
Deb is the assistant accountant, so.
Put it into the insurance category.
Okay.
Got it. Okay. Any further questions up front regarding insurance? No? Okay, thank you, David. Okay, we are then on to, and David, you have nothing else, so we're on to the recycling committee. Thank you for your patience this morning. It's just the Vadar versus the old school. Good morning.
Morning.
This is Wendy McCaber. I'm Charles Tyler. We're co-chairs of the recycling committee because after Carol Rubenstein left, it took two of us to fill her shoes. So that's where we are now. We are requesting a level funded budget for the coming year. And we have a bunch of things going on. We're trying to get our food waste composting increased because it actually saves us money in terms of the trash that's going out. We are now up to about 6 containers per week that is being taken out. We started out with very few. We figured that once we got to 4 containers, it would break us even in terms of the amount we're paying for compost, as opposed to how much we would pay to put that weight, which is incredible, into the trash. And so we're now exceeding that to some extent. I don't have any particular.
So 6 of those green containers where I dump my compost?
The green containers where you dump your compost as well, yes, right. And one of the things that's in our budget is to buy those little 3-gallon bags for people to use to bring the compost in. And that seems to be very, very successful, and it's also something that's helping to increase that. We have some other things going on as well. Wendy may have some.
Well, I was just going to say that, obviously, if you look at the bottom line, because we are also getting state DEP grants, we spend some of that money for recycling committee expenses. That's limited. There are certain criteria that you can spend that money on. So where possible, we're spending money where we need money from the town to cover the items that they don't cover or won't cover. But again, anything that's not spent goes back to the town, so it's not as if we're costing the town that much money. It's useful for planning to know that we have that amount available to us. Most of what we do is education, advocacy, and trying to get people to get more of their waste into the right recycling composting streams. And as Charlie said, the composting program is growing, and that actually is the most cost-effective way for the town to deal with their heavy wet weight compostable materials. So that's really been our push, and we have a couple of other initiatives that we're working ahead on.
In addition, the DEP has a plan in the offing to decrease the amount of waste that you produce in terms of food waste before you have to recycle it. So they're tightening the restrictions on those things as well. And they're instituting some extra bans in the next year, or planning to, on food waste, as well as textiles. We're going to work more on our textile program, trying to keep textiles out of the trash and put them into recycling, which in terms of the place where we send our textiles, we actually get some money back for the textiles as well. So that's a plus. Mattresses as well are going to be banned totally from going in the trash, and we already have a full-fledged mattress program going on. And we collect some fees for that, probably not enough quite to cover what we're spending, but there's a question of whether you want to increase fees on that or whether you want to allow the town to offer some benefits to the citizens for the taxes that they're paying. So, in that sense.
Okay. Quick question, paper recycling, has the market come back at all, or is it still in the dumps?
No, but we're not being charged. We've got a grandfather situation, which is fantastic. They take our separated out paper, we're paying for trucking, but we're not paying for disposal at the moment.
And that's because we separate our paper. We are a dual separation facility, as opposed to the people who do single stream. Single stream people are paying through the nose for their paper. We're paying zero because the recycling facility can actually get some return on the product that we send them by separating out the corrugated and things like that, and actually they make enough on that so that they don't have to charge us extra.
Is that with E.L. Harvey?
Yes.
That's right.
Yes, it is. Yeah. If I can say it. The commingled is a separate thing. The commingled jars, bottles, those containers, that's gone up somewhat in the past year, but we're still paying a lot less than a lot of communities are, because they don't have to separate it as much. And we're also working in our informational advocacy to keep people from putting things in that make it harder for the recycling facility to do that stuff. So that will keep us from increasing in terms of commingled as well.
Excuse me, sorry, how long is the contract with E.L. Harvey?
It's actually, the contract that we had with them expired like a year and a half ago, but they're continuing under that contract, okay, to keep us in their line of fire, and we're actually a preferred customer for them because of the separation that we do, and because we pay attention.
But I was going to say, it's also the case that Sherborn doesn't have a choice. It's a DEP regulation that you have to separate out your recyclables. So it's not as if Sherborn is deciding to recycle at this point. The town has to.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering how long we'd be able to take advantage of not being charged for the
Charge
paper.
until they decide it's not working for them.
Yeah, it seems to be pretty indefinite. What E.L. Harvey is doing is waiting until things stabilize in the recycling industry before they come and renegotiate our contract, and that, I think it's working out fairly on both sides in that way. Until some markets in the United States are developed for the recycled materials, we're going to be stuck, kind of scrambling, and they're stuck scrambling, and they've been pretty fair with us, and they're very responsive as well.
So I can fill in some here. Since I represent bigger communities, we're actively in pre-litigation mode with many of the, not suppliers, vendors who take recycling, and rather than them trying to take on 351 cities and towns, they're not bothering with the smaller ones, they're going after the bigger ones. So we've been firing nasty letters back and forth with some of the leading recycler companies to get them to continue to perform. They won't. They've been sending enormous bills, which my towns have been refusing to pay. Litigation has commenced in a few test cases. So this is all going to come to a big head later on. But right now, Sherborn should be okay because we're too small and because we're doing more than many of the other communities are doing in terms of keeping it clean. All of this started with the policy from China, who was taking so much of the recycled products, and they decided, either for political reasons or for economic reasons, that depends on your political party as to which you take, to not accept waste from the United States. The Chinese said it was contaminated in the sense that there's too much commingled stuff and not clean, so they didn't want to handle it at all. And the United States hasn't found other countries to take it to the same quantities. So now there's a surplus of the stuff that used to get shipped out from the Pacific to China, and it's no longer leaving the United States. We have to find places to deal with it here in the United States. So that's led Commonwealth of Massachusetts to try and intervene in these things. So you've got the United States involved, you've got the Commonwealth of Massachusetts involved, you've got all of the bigger cities and towns involved. It's probably not going to end very well because the economics aren't there to support some of this recycling. But for the time being, we should be okay.
Yeah, that's why the Harvey contract will be stable for a while, I suspect.
Yes,
because
yeah.
China actually went from accepting 25% contamination to less than 1% contamination. They still will accept America's waste, but it has to be less than 1% contamination within that. And I'm very disappointed actually in DP and the states. They've given no local or tax incentives for local separation facilities, and that's what we lack. We lost the local glass recycling, and we don't have any good local separation facilities. So a few years ago, all the big communities got hooked on single stream, and we didn't. And that was one of the smartest things we did. And now everyone's hooked on single stream. They're not going to go backwards. They're not going to go back to it. And this stuff just keeps piling up to the point that, for straight sanitation, communities are paying like now lows like $50, $60 a ton. If recycling, $80 to $90 a ton. It makes no sense, but it's just the way it is. And it'll stay that way for a while.
Yeah, frankly, it's our own fault because our garbage, our recyclables have been so contaminated with garbage that it's been turned down in places where we were sending it, and now we're having to deal with it ourselves, and we still will have to clean it up to make it worthwhile. And that's, again, one of the things that we are advocating, along with the DEP. And a lot of the stuff that we're doing at the transfer station now for recycling are things that make us eligible for grants from the DEP. There's the recycling dividend program that the state has, which is sort of a carrot and stick to keep us going in the recycling mode as
I
well.
think you're also going to be working with the new sustainability coordinator as well on your recycling committee, I assume.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've made one of the representatives of our committee is going to be on the.
Right, I knew that, yeah.
I understand.
Which is great.
Right, I think, just sort of thinking ahead, the place that Sherborn can really save itself more money is by increasing composting and figuring out a way to handle that so that the costs are neutral.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great.
Also, the third grade class at Pine Hill these days, they are into recycling, so next generation's coming along.
So I will just say, Pine Hill has been composting their food waste since 2010. The rest of Sherborn should follow suit.
Follow the lead of our kids.
Okay. Any further questions up front here about recycling? Okay, we're on to transfer stations. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I think this is going to be a very similar discussion when it comes to recycling, right, Sean?
I would like to hope so.
I think you're all done.
We already talked about
They
it.
just answered all the questions. I'm seriously answered all the questions.
No, so I saw that, like,
I
the
mean,
increase
does
is pretty
anyone
much
have-
in the recycling
Yeah, the
costs.
increase, the most significant one is, well, operations, which is pretty much just covered under the contract with the operator. And part of that increase is we're shifting some responsibilities that the DPW had onto the contractor for trash pickup in a couple areas. And of course, there's obviously an increase, and then, I'm not finding it, I can't read these.
Recycling increase was
Sorry, and
9,000.
and
which-
disposal,
Yep.
which is what's covering those increases. And it looks like a big increase, but I don't have the up-to-date reports, but I basically masked where the cost looked like it was headed this year. I was just trying to project where that was headed. We don't have any control over that. So although the 3-year average looks low, it's because it's taken off on us. We did fortunately cover it. The past 2 years, we had increases in the budget because we caught it before. Right about the time the China thing hit, we were in our first round of budget 2 years ago, so.
So, Sean, you're still talking about the recycling line item, correct, within
Yeah,
transfer? Okay. Yep. So the move to 40K.
Right.
So what's driving that? Because we heard that the paper was still getting a good
Everything we
deal.
just talked about. Well, paper nets out, but we used to make money on paper. And then the commingled is up and continues to be up. And then all the other vendors are headed up. The electronics went up significantly. It's not a huge number, but that's the trend. And most of that isn't contracts. We have vendors that are just going out of business, 1 week they're there and they're gone. And then we have to scramble to other vendors. Luckily, the past few, we had another vendor already on the hook to pick up items, but when the price doubles, there's not much we can do about it. We're required to take the electronics, we're required to take some of the chemicals. We're obviously required to take the commingled bottles and cans, and like Selectman Johnson said, it's costing $20 a ton, 20 or 25 a ton more. And we still have, I would bet we'd probably have the most favorable pricing from E.L. Harvey of anyone around. And it's just because we're small enough. If we had a high volume, they wouldn't be able to afford to do it. We have their equipment at our site and they're not charging us for it.
Well, it's also because we do a great job at the transfer station of going through the recycling.
Right.
The people that are there are constantly picking through it. I mean, they do a great job monitoring what the rest of us aren't doing right.
So, Sean, the two big increases I see are in transfer operations.
Yep.
Right? And is that staffing? Sorry, what's that change?
Again, yeah, that's a contract with the vendor.
Okay.
And
There's not
part
even
of the
a-
increase is just an increase with the new contract and because of wages.
And sorry, the contractor, does the town directly hire the people who are working at the transfer station, or is that?
No.
Oh, we've outsourced
No, it's a
that.
single we outsource that.
Through Ruane, right?
Right.
Gotcha.
So this is the Ruane contract that we're.
The operations is, yeah.
Okay. And then the increase of $9,000 over last year on recycling, as these guys were just discussing.
And again, I don't think that's a $9,000 over what it's gonna cost. That was over the ask from last year. Looking like that was a projection that was probably gonna be right based on what this year's expense. We'll be short this year.
And you feel the disposal number of 90,000 is going to be stable?
I hope so. I mean, that's somewhat been stable.
Okay.
We
That-
haven't
is
had,
that-
we haven't
is
had
that
much of an
trucking
increase.
cost for
That's
the
like a
general
tonnage in
trash?
trucking, right?
That's, yeah,
Tonnage.
trucking and disposal at,
Millbury.
excuse me?
Millbury, isn't it? Signal
Yeah,
Wesco?
and- yeah.
Millbury
incinerator,
yes. Yeah. How long, when does that contract expire? We've had a contract with them forever.
It's another, I think 8 or 10 years. I think it was a 25-year contract.
Since the mid-twenties.
The new equipment line, $8,500, that's fluctuated in previous years. It was $6,200 in 18 and 0 in 19, $8,500 in 20. Is that, is there a specific stuff that you know you're gonna need to buy that?
Yeah, the dumpsters that we hauled in Millbury, we got caught a little off guard because we had to rush and buy one this year. The doors were falling off the thing, and we own those. That's part of the contract with the hauler. So there are containers, and it was getting to the point where he couldn't even run it down the highway. So we bought one this year, and I think it's in, and then we need another one.
So we budgeted, back to the recycling, we budgeted 31,000 last year, and you said that won't be enough.
not
Do you- Where are we
You mean
running?
for current fiscal year, right?
Right,
You think so? You expect
Yeah.
end of year you'll be over it?
Yes.
by about how, I mean, how is it running?
I'm guessing that if on New Year's Eve I said we needed 40, I'm gonna guess we probably need 40. Again, these are all projections from when we were at 40% of the year. I don't know if you have the to-date expenditures, but I don't.
Sharon, what-
If I may speak, one of the things that happened, and Sean referred to this, was that we had to go with a different electronics recycler. Their fees went up pretty dramatically, closer to what a lot of other people are paying, actually. We were doing very well before. So it may be that we will want to look at increasing the fees that we charge to residents judiciously. For instance, refrigerators, we've been charging $20 for, were we getting away with that before? We're now paying $50 a piece for refrigerators to be recycled. There are a few things like that. Air conditioners are costing more, substantially more than they have in the past. And so small details like that are building up, and the electronics has been a particularly large increase from what it has been in the past.
We were talking about this earlier in the meeting with other departments. I think absolutely. I mean, if it's costing us $50 for a refrigerator, we should be charging residents $50 for a refrigerator.
I'm actually working on a spreadsheet to see what we're collecting in fees as to how it balances with what we're paying. And
Great.
And we'll probably have something that we can work with a little bit later on.
Okay.
But we would be happy to come and talk with you folks, of course, before we make any adjustments like that.
It's actually, I've hesitated. I mean, it obviously came up one week when a vendor just was supposed to come pick up material, and they were nowhere to be found.
Disappeared.
We wanted it to stabilize out a little bit, at least, so we knew what the cost would be before we came to you, so we don't make
Right.
changes every 3 months.
Right. That makes sense.
I'm not sure how much it's stabilized out, and so that's not gonna show up here, of course. Our expenses are showing up on these sheets, but we're gonna capture some of that in the revenue.
Those fees that we're talking about would come back into the general fund too, so it will not show up in the budget. It's one of those balancing acts that you were talking about before.
Right.
Yeah.
But if we stay on top of it where we're charging people what it's costing us, that should help limit what our increases in the recycling line item here.
Who's the operations vendor?
What's that?
The operations vendor?
Ruane and Father?
That's Ruane. So that is a fairly significant increase, given that the 3-year average is 77. Is there a reason why that's going up so much?
Well, it's not really a 3-year average. That's a 2-year average plus the budget. Again, it's because there's 2 things going on with the contract. One, we have to increase what they're accounting for with the salaries because minimum wage is going up. And 2, we're shifting some extra trash pickup and roadside pickup that DPW is doing to them. They're better suited to go pick up trash than sending DPW workers across the town in a dump truck to go get it. So there's an increased workload on them that's coming off of the DPW side. You're not gonna see it on the DPW side, it's just buried in operational time.
I just wonder if there's, I mean, are we in a contract with them? Is that a fixed fee that we must pay?
Yeah, we're in the process of renewing the contract. So yeah, that is a fixed contract.
It's a fixed
It
contract, but it's in
It covers the
process of-
operations there. It also covers the trash pickup here, the trash and recycling pickup here and all the other town buildings. If that
Including
makes sense.
Pine Hill?
So it shows up at transfer station, but it's what you don't otherwise see in like the facilities budget for your pickup.
I guess where I'm going with this is just to try to see if we're in the process of renewing the contract, given how tight, budgets are this year, is there a possibility that we could, explain to them that there's been pushback for a good reason?
Well, I'm telling you that we're saving more than that by shifting workload off of the DPW because I'm reducing costs on the DPW side.
They're a really
That-
good
that does a change.
contractor. They've done a wonderful job for that. And we've asked them to do a lot of things, and they've always been willing to do that. So, and they're local people. So I don't want to see us trying to cause any violence with that favorable arrangement that we have.
Right. They do step up and do extra for the town. They always have. Sean, is that an annual contract, or do we do like a 3-year or a 5-year contract with them?
It's
or-
a 3-year. And again, this is only 2 years average in a budget. If you went back 5 years, 6 years, there's a fair amount of work that was rolled into their contract that was previously not billed. And actually, there's one now, what we can't see is they've been billing previously to pick up Woodhaven. They've dumpsters over at Woodhaven, recycling and trash. That's rolled into the contract now. So you're not seeing that.
Library as well. They were being invoiced separately.
Right.
That was rolled in.
Right, so we're capturing everything that previously wasn't being done.
So are we going to see reductions in those other budgets as a result?
Yeah, those are going away. I mean, there's no specific, I don't know where the specific line item is in the library budget, but, again, you've seen the increase here, but it's coming from elsewhere.
We'll make note of it for our February 12th meeting with library.
Yeah, exactly.
Going back to the recycling increase of $9,000, I get it. I don't doubt you guys have all thought about and think about what else to do with the recycling, but basically, there's nothing else to do, right? You just gotta kind of eat the increased costs. We give it to some farmers who are gonna compost it. Again, it's not like I've got ideas, I don't know anything about this, but.
Well, they are working on those grants. I would not even consider decreasing the budget to short fund the budget, assuming they're gonna pull that off. It would probably, I think, especially with the composting, we probably could start doing something in town. It's gonna take a year to do that.
Right.
So there's no way we should be considering that in this budget.
And I think, if we make a lot of progress with the sustainability coordinator and it does help this budget, I mean, it will, and if this budget's over at the end of the year, it'll fall back to the general fund, but as Sean says, I think you'd be foolhardy to short fund when we know what the costs, how the costs have been increasing on this budget in particular.
We should also point out that probably 2/3 of the towns are having these meetings this year talking about how they're gonna recover from the hundreds of thousands of dollars they came up short. So, we didn't because we fought for the past 2 years to cover it.
And if I recall, we don't have a fixed contract with them by choice because we feel like we're getting a better deal
With
by not.
E.L. Harvey,
Yeah, but also with just Harvey, or are there others as well?
the recycling? Recycling's with E.L. Harvey.
Oh,
We had a
100%.
contract, it lapsed. When we notified them that we didn't have a contract, they were generous enough to take a look at how much money they were losing, and we've been paying a huge increase since then. Had we not said anything, we probably would have been better off. No, we don't have a contract, but we have their equipment in our facility that would probably cost about $70,000 or $80,000 to replace.
Wendy, you want to add a comment?
I was just gonna say that, I mean, in addition to what E.L. Harvey takes, the compost goes to a different company, styrofoam goes to a different company. At metal, for example, we get money back on, fabric we get money back on. It's not much, but it's not costing the town to remove those items from the trash stream. And as Sean was saying, Sherborn has the most to gain, in fact, by handling its compost locally with the help of the DEP grant to try to come up with something. So that's a way of removing money from the budget, because then the town would get funds to develop the town-wide facility the town would be benefit to the town.
Charles?
In terms of E.L. Harvey or another contractor picking up things like that, one of the advantages of Wayne and Father is they're willing, when they pick up, to keep stuff separated, that we separated our transfer station. Most other firms, like you see the orifices and things like that on the side of the road, they're all doing single stream composting, and it's going somewhere else, and it's going into a waste stream that, as we were talking about, has a real trouble separating all that stuff out again, that we separate on the front end. So that's another advantage in terms of what Wayne is willing to do under their contract as opposed to going with another contractor for pickup of waste.
Wendy?
There's one other item in recycling that I don't know if Sean was going to talk about, but Sherborn holds a household hazardous waste day, and that also gets built into the budget that Sean is now talking about. And that is a large amount. It's about $6,000 a year. But neighboring towns who send their residents are billed for every resident they send, so we're pulling back about $1,500 of that expense from the neighboring towns.
That goes to the general fund again, so.
Right, never goes back to the
Okay.
budget.
Okay.
And I know it's not much money, but I just have to ask, the big percentage increases for electricity and pest control, why would that be?
For the what?
For electricity and pest control, there's very big percentage increases, not a lot of dollars, but just curious as to why, since all of this is added.
We're gonna talk about electricity the whole time. It's going up. The rates aren't what they were.
But I was saying it was more like 3% in the.
3%?
It's not. That
No,
is
we're
not-
up a lot more than 3% since a couple of years ago.
Electricity?
Maybe nationwide it's 3% or
Is
through
it
the
up
state.
16%?
The town's rate is not 3%.
Again, it's not a lot of money, but it's just, it's all additive, so 16% seems like a large.
Well, Jane, if you look back at what the actuals were in 18 and 19, and what, last year was only budgeted at 3,000, where that's well below what the average has been over the last few years, so I think maybe it was under budgeted for a few years here.
I would also
All right,
add,
yeah, I wasn't looking at that line. Again, I'm basing that off of costs. You're basing an average off of a budget. So I'm sure last year I said 3,000 wasn't enough, and I'm certain you said, well, we're gonna hold 3,000. So that's what happens when you underfund it. I can't make the electricity go down there. Maybe you can throw that at the sustainability coordinator, but there's
so there is a way,
hydraulic pumps there and lights. That is what it is.
there is a way to make the electricity a profit center, and that is to put solar panels on the cap landfill. And it's something that the town has talked about for a number of years. And originally, the Energy Committee looked at it and thought the slopes were too steep to have solar panels there, but technology has really been moving ahead fairly rapidly. If you had a solar panel on the landfill, that would not only offset the cost, but probably end up getting us a check from the electric company for the net metering effect. I recall discussing that with Michael Lesser several times. While there are slope issues, you now see these kind of panels going on landfills regularly, and they do have these stilts and other things that allow for terrain to be adapted and still get the solar power. I think one of the concerns was that what effect would have on the cap on the old landfill, and you can put these legs down in a way that doesn't affect the membrane cap. So this would be engineering, there have to be an investment, all of that, but you could make this all self-sustaining.
I think we're all set with this budget. I don't know. I don't have any more from up here. And lunch is here.
Yeah. Once again, I have a hard time with these increases, but I recognize these are hard outside costs that the only way we can get around it seems is to not offer these services, which would be detrimental to the town and maybe other parts of the budget, so. Okay. Is there any other comments up front here?
Yeah, if I can, just briefly, I do not want to stand between people and lunch right now, but, this is an instance where I think it would really be valuable to understand a little bit more about user fees, about, how those are charged and how flexible those are right now. I think, user fees for disposal of individual, like items, things like refrigerators and stuff like that. If you guys are empowered to change those fees,
The select board.
We are.
So you guys have.
So that's why he's gonna come up with the schedule, and we'll
I would-
definitely look at those.
I would advocate for changing those fees annually based on the prior year,
One of the things we
unit
have to be
costs.
careful of changing fees is to be sure that we don't raise them so much that we are then making money, because that brings us into another category.
Sure, but I would be surprised if, well, so let's not, we don't need to dig into this now. The other piece is, what does it cost to get a sticker for the transfer center? $0. Is that?
It's almost $20 a thousand, actually. It's paid for by your taxes.
Yeah, no, so this is, this is a case where I think it might, like, do we have the ability to charge a fee for that? I mean, we get our sticker, we get the Farm Pond and Transfer Center sticker, so, it's $75 or something. $5 of that, tack some on for the Transfer Center.
The common alternative is pay as you throw. We actually have set bags and so on. I know this community has resisted it. Other communities are doing it. Some are resisting it. Takes away some of the freedom of how much you can dispose of. But you should look it up. The pay as you throw model is actually becoming more and more common out there for this exact reason.
Yeah, years ago, when I was on recycling committee, we were looking at it. There's a suburb of Philadelphia, Percy, Pennsylvania, that went to pay as you throw, and they increased their recycling rate ginormously. It was a big number. I can't remember. It's too many years ago.
Have you guys looked at that on recycling?
Sherborn is already close to 40% recycling rate. We are doing outstanding.
Yeah,
compared
our numbers
to
are
every other
great.
community. So the added cost to find plastic bags would not be offset by a change in behavior.
We
But
had a
still it's a
study
fee for
that
what
the
you
DEP was involved in, and, yeah, the DEP actually didn't recommend that we go with pay as you throw because we're already doing pretty well for recycling. Can we improve? Yes. But, changing people's behavior is a big deal,
But back then it was pushed though for the encourage recycling. It's still
Yeah.
fundamental to pay for. Makes a separate revenue stream for sanitation itself. You know what I mean?
Sherborn could reduce its Millbury expenses by about a third if it got all the compost out of the trash. And that seems like a better, easier win for the town. But the wet weight is what's driving up the price.
Actually, Wendy, aren't you going to be bringing something to the board as a
We're gonna
rollout
talk
for the
about it later this
composting?
spring,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
And just to be inflammatory, the state of Vermont is moving to mandated composting as of July 1.
household
Right,
food waste, yeah.
right.
So just, if I could,
That's Vermont, we're in Massachusetts, but DEP is mindful of this change in the world.
just want to add one other comment. Where you start burdening people with costs for disposal, what they end up doing is throwing it over the fences. And as a property owner, I can tell you, I have dug out toilets and bags of trash along my property with people who have a free system, but instead of going the whole way, I mean, why somebody would throw a whole toilet is still mind-boggling.
So, let me, that was a point I was trying to make. One of the costs increases here that drives us is an increase to the, on the operations side, because they're gonna be picking up a lot of the roadside trash. We have a work order system. We don't track everything, but just for an example, in the past 2 weeks, we picked up a 275-gallon oil drum on the side of Prospect Street. We'd probably go Prospect, Perry, and Brush Hill 2 to 3 times a week to pick up large items, like items that came out of the back of a truck.
Coming
So
from
if
Framingham.
What's that?
It sounds like.
Where you actually have
Pay as you
to,
throw.
yeah, actually actually, they're not paid to throw back. In other communities, where actually, we do make it more and more stringent to get rid of big things, because they're more
Right,
big.
and when they make it more difficult, we end up picking them up. And that comes at a pretty high cost.
One of those things they, Framingham Department of, whatever Eric's department is on there, or no?
What's that?
No, I'm sorry, I was making a joke.
We should send them a little bit further.
Yeah, really.
Well, Steve, are you guys ready to break for lunch?
I think unless there's any further comments up here on this budget item? Okay, we will take an adjournment for lunch.
What time? Come back 12:15?
I'd like to say 12:15, guys. We're not doing great on time. We still have a number of budgets and capital items to get through this afternoon. And so I will do my darndest to start us right back up at 12:15 to get through the next round of budgets.